There I am. What a handsome gentleman. Just going to give it a couple minutes. We're 3 minutes early. Just wanted to make sure everything was running. As always, if there's any problem with the audio, someone just tell me in the chat room. I'll type that too. Yeah, for those of you here, thank you so much. I'll start directly at 10 a.m., so I got 2 minutes. I probably have literally several people that might be waiting for 10 a.m., so. Okay. We might as well start. Whoever's watching, if you could just let me know if you could hear me, or just let me know if there's any problems with hearing me or a resolution or anything like that. Thank you, I appreciate it. So, I'll get started. The first thing to say is, I wanted to talk about Barr today, being held in contempt in this Trump tax return business. I apologize. My life's going to be very hectic until the end of May. I'm buying a house, and, it says streamers will. That's weird. Anyways, I'm buying a house. My work schedule's been ridiculous, so I haven't been able to do... Hey, good morning, Sean. I've been able to do the normal video volume that I would like. So I will eventually, at the end of May, I'm going to have a new house, a new studio. I got some stuff I'm going to be working on, so I should be able to put out more consistent material of a better quality and things like that. So that'll be coming. Having said that, I thought it was important to talk about this Barr situation being in contempt and the idea of Trump's tax returns and things like that. So that's why I'm doing the live stream. I go into work today at 2, so that's why it's a little earlier than it normally would be. I tried my best to get someone that disagreed with me to come on and have this conversation with me, because I think someone who came from debate in university, I understand the importance of not only just so every viewer can see positions from both sides, and it's easier for someone who truly believes a position to be able to give that position. I could try to give a devil's advocate position, but you know where I'm coming from, and so it's not always as well formulated as someone who truly believes that position might have. And also it helps buttress your own positions if you have someone to debate. What we're seeing right now, and I'm not a fan of the mainstream media, as you all know anyways, but I do think that there's a couple shows, particularly Tucker, that I like. Tucker will at least bring people on that disagrees with him. Now, people say, well, he always brings on, like, kind of the dumbest possible person. I don't think that's true at all. The guy he has on, Goldstein, I can't remember his name, but he's a professor of African-American studies that he had on last night, who's not bad. And there's several people that he has on. I might not agree with those people, but they're certainly competent people in their position, and they're more reasonable than people on the extremes sometimes. So I get more out of that show, because there's even times where I'll say, yeah, I think that person got the better of Tucker on this particular argument. And what I see when I'm looking at the media today with all of this nonsense about we're in a constitutional crisis, it's a joke. There's no truth to that whatsoever. But they're just repeating this verbatim, and they won't bring anyone on from the other side to discuss, like, look, we could clearly out of hand dismiss this in like 5 minutes. They won't bring anyone on, and this is kind of it's becoming even more exemplified. This was exactly what happened with the Russia collusion situation. Now, I know let's say you're on the left and you might be saying to me like, well, yeah, but CNN's not going to bring on a right-wing person. Why would they bring on a right-wing person? Okay, but they should, and even if they don't, there's plenty of left-wing people that were criticizing the Russia collusion story, that are criticizing this Barr and contempt situation, such as Glenn Greenwald from The Intercept, Aaron Mattei, who works, I think, with The Independent, The Nation, I think he works with that, sorry, and other people like that. So we never get anything out of it because the average person's just choosing their channel or whatever, and they just get that side of the information. And so there are a lot of people out there thinking right now today, oh my goodness, there's a constitutional crisis. Can you believe what Trump's doing? There must be something hidden in the Mueller report that's been redacted that proves his guilt, that proves that he's a Russian agent. And that's absurd. That's not the case whatsoever, as I think that I'll be able to prove why this position's stupid. So we're going to start there. We're going to start with the idea of Barr being held in contempt. Now, the first thing I would like to do is give my disclosure. If you've listened to my last live stream, you're probably tired of hearing me say this, but I think it is the most important thing when talking about anything connected to the Mueller report. Never forget, all the Democrats that are raising a huge stink, saying things like constitutional crisis, all the media people that are parroting that, these are the exact same people that did the following two things. They lied to you for 2 years about Russia collusion. They told us every day, Mueller's going to take Trump down. Don Jr. is going to be led away in handcuffs. Trump's an agent of Russia. He's committed treason. He's, an agent for Russia. He's selling this country down. They ignored all the evidence. They ignored that Trump's been harder on Russia than any president since Reagan. They ignored all of that. And they just kept telling you this without bringing anyone on to challenge their views. They told you for 2 years. And again, I stress, maybe you're one of my left-leaning friends that are watching this. Of course they lied to me. Of course they lied to right-wing people. They don't like us, but they lied to you, the left-wing people. They told you that they had proof. We had people like Adam Schiff saying, I've seen the evidence. I know that Trump conspired with Russians to steal the election. They told us this for 2 years. 2 years that the Democrats, if you don't like Trump, you could have had your party as the Democrats, challenging some of his policy positions. Instead, they just kept saying, Russian agent, Russian agent. We need more investigations, more investigations. That's what they said over and over again. They lied to you. They lied. And the Mueller report showed that. And so they're so shameless that they just immediately, they don't apologize for that lie. They act like they did great. They gave each other awards. They say they're fantastic. They're First Amendment personified. They're everything that keeps this country moving. And they just move on to the next lie. Why should we believe any of these liars after a lie of that magnitude for 2 years? So that's the first thing. Remember, all of this is a partial deflection from the fact that they don't want to be called out or focus on the fact that, like, wait a minute, this time last year, the story you were talking about, Russia collusion, that was a lie. Oh, no, don't worry about that. We're on to obstruction. We're on to William Barr now. So remember that. That's point number one. Point number two, this is all about obstruction, whether it be with Trump or Barr. That's what they want to have you believe, right? Never forget, the exact same people that are yelling the loudest about obstruction, the exact same ones in the media, the Democrats, the Nadlers of the world, the Schiffs, the Pelosi's, right? All of those people, the Don Lemons, the Cuomos, the New York Times, that exact same group of people had no problem with Hillary Clinton's team destroying subpoenaed evidence. To them, that wasn't obstruction. That wasn't a story worth focusing on. That wasn't a constitutional crisis. A person who they all assumed would be president getting a subpoena that says you have to turn over this evidence and then deciding to destroy that evidence after they got that subpoena. They didn't think that was obstruction. So when they tell you that Trump's mean tweets are obstruction, or Barr's committing obstruction because there's a few lines redacted in the Mueller report, when they tell you that, you know that they're liars. They don't care about obstruction. Again, I tried to bring someone on that disagreed with me, that I could have a debate on. I am comfortable, I might not be the smartest person in the world, I am comfortable that you could give me the most intelligent person that thinks that Trump's committing obstruction, and I would make them look foolish if they believe that Trump's tweets were obstruction, but Hillary's team deleting subpoenaed evidence wasn't obstruction. Anyone that's just remotely has any conscience of what's going on here could see. Take the names Trump and Hillary out of it. Person one had mean tweets and threatened to fire people but never did. That's obstruction. But person two had law enforcement or investigative agencies say, we need this evidence from you, and subpoenaed it, and they destroyed that evidence. But that's not obstruction. That's the absurd double standard that these people want you to believe. So everything that I say from here on out about Barr and being in contempt and the Democrats and the media, just remember that point. Everything I say is just icing. They've lost the debate. The debate's 99.9% over. But I'll argue they're 0.01% as well and prove why they're wrong and stupid and vindictive on that as well. So just don't forget that. When you're arguing with people or where you're having this discussion or when you're watching the news, remember, if you turn on MSNBC and you see Joe Scarborough saying, "Oh my God, our country, it's a constitutional crisis. Oh, what are we going to do?" Remember, they didn't have a problem. They think that this is a constitutional crisis because Barr has a couple redacted lines in the Mueller report, which is legit, as I'll get to. That's a constitutional crisis. But Hillary Clinton destroying subpoenaed evidence and the FBI letting her get away with it that was ran by, Hillary's ally and former employer, Barack Obama. They didn't have a problem with that. So, just absolutely ridiculous. Now, let's get on to the Barr situation. So for those of you who don't know, if you haven't been paying attention, it seems really confusing. There's subpoenas being issued, and is Barr refusing to adhere to subpoenas, and there was executive privilege used by Trump, and what's going on here? And the problem is, the more of this kind of stuff that goes on, it allows the media and the Democrats to spin this, see, there's all these cogs moving, and that proves that there's something shady going on, because it confuses the average person. It's just like, for example, the bank bailouts was one of the big issues I was political on, with my friends on the left, mostly, by the way. Though there were certainly those of us on the right that were against those bailouts. You can make it so confusing. Well, the banks do this and this and this and this and this and this and this, therefore we have to give them your tax dollars. But when you break it down real simply, when you get through all the garbage, it's way clearer to see how absurd the position is. And that's the same here. So take out the executive privilege. We can talk about that later. Take everything else. Why is Barr being held in contempt by the House? Now, Barr already went and spoke in front of the Senate. The Senate's controlled by Republicans. The House of Representatives is, the Judiciary Committee is controlled by Jerry Nadler and the Democrats. And so they're the ones that have voted. They haven't held him in contempt yet. They voted to have a vote to hold him in contempt. And the vote to hold him in contempt will have to be the entire Congress. He probably will be held in contempt because the entire House of Representatives, because the House is primarily Democrat and they usually vote as a bloc, so they'll probably vote to hold him in contempt. If he's held in contempt, what does that mean? Well, that's look at it like this. You go to trial and the jury votes guilty, but then it's the judge's job to punish you. Well, the executive branch ultimately is the branch that implements punishment if someone's held in contempt. And who's in charge of, who's the highest ranking member of the executive branch law enforcement agency? Well, that's Barr. So do you think Barr is going to punish himself because a bunch of partisan Democrats say that he's in contempt? No. So it's not going to go anywhere. Just the same, by the way, as when Eric Holder was held in contempt. Eric Holder didn't punish himself. It'll be the exact same thing. The Democrats could, yell and scream and say that that's unfair all they want. But that's just the reality of it. So that's what happened. That's what's going to happen with that. Now, the reason that Nadler and company is holding Barr in contempt is they claim that they want to see a fully unredacted version. All of Congress should have access to a fully unredacted version of the Mueller report. Now, I'm someone who's normally for transparency, and I don't even care if they see the fully unredacted version. I don't care at all. It wouldn't bother me that much. The problem is, what they're asking Barr to do is against the law. So there were 4 different types of redactions that were given in the Mueller report that we all got to see and that Congress got to see. There were 4 specific types of redactions. There were grand jury testimony redactions. There were redactions for things of ongoing cases. There were redactions, I think that they thought would hurt sources and methods within the intel community. And then there were redactions of people that weren't accused of a crime, that there could be personal information released of them. All of that makes sense to redact. Here's the reason. This is why traditionally, if there aren't charges brought, prosecutors don't release the underlying information that led them to make their decision. Remember, the same people that are yelling and screaming about these redactions now, the exact same people are the people that were furious that Comey came out and said, here's all the crap Hillary did, but we're not going to charge her. They said, how dare you do that? That was just smearing Hillary then. Now, Comey was corrupt, and Hillary should have been charged for the reasons that he outlined in his speech. But nonetheless, if he wasn't going to charge her, he had no business airing all that dirty laundry. That's not the job of investigative agencies. Picture that you yourself are being investigated by the police. They might find out all kinds, they subpoena your computer or your phone records. They might find out all kinds of embarrassing stuff about you that would make you look bad if the public saw it, but it has nothing to do with you committing the crime that you were accused of. For example, maybe you're talking with another man or woman, or, you admit on the phone that, you lied about saying you were sick to call off work. Who knows? It could be anything. But the public doesn't have a right to see that information. It's either, hey, did you commit the crime or not? That's traditionally the rule of investigators and prosecutors. They're not supposed to say, oh, here's all the evidence we compiled, and here, public, you can see it, but no, we didn't recommend a crime. And spinning off that a little, it's also not the job of prosecutors to, quote, exonerate someone. That's not their job. We live in a society based on English common law, and I've been arguing since the Kavanaugh hearings that that was the final straw for me why I could never vote for a Democrat, because they were literally arguing against the very foundation of the legal system of our country, which is innocent until proven guilty. With Kavanaugh, they said, no, if you have the wrong genitals, then you're guilty until proven innocent. You have to prove that you didn't rape that woman. And I was like, this is beyond Republican and Democrat, or liberal and conservative. This is literally, adapting that stance has the power to literally bring our country to its knees. And it does. That's true. And we see the same type of argument being made here. Well, Mueller says he didn't exonerate Trump from obstruction of justice, and so there's two things to say on this. One, if that's how you're going to take, if you're going to take that literally, well, the fact that Mueller didn't say he couldn't exonerate Trump from Russia collusion must mean that he did exonerate Trump from Russia collusion, which means right from the beginning, what I said, the most important thing is these Democrats and these media people lied for 2 years. So Trump, according to them, Trump's exonerated, Mueller's exonerated Trump. Because if he said specifically just on the obstruction part, well, I couldn't exonerate Trump here, that must mean implicitly that Mueller was saying, but I could exonerate him on the other, in Volume 1, which was the Russia collusion angle. So now all the eggs are just in the, well, we think that Trump did what Bill Clinton did, obstructed justice. Okay, what did you all say about Bill Clinton? Did you recommend him being removed from office? Oh, no, but the standards change now. And Trump didn't commit obstruction anyways, as I'll get to. But that's just accepting their argument. That's what their own argument shows us. It's not the job of Mueller to exonerate. It's innocent until proven guilty. Is there evidence to charge you with a crime? No? Okay, that's it. Let's say that I get pulled over for speeding, right, in my local town. I get pulled over for speeding. I go to court. The police officer's like, or the investigators look at it, and the police officer's like, well, okay, I didn't really have a radar gun, and I just felt like he was speeding, but, I don't know. I guess, in retrospect, I don't have any definitive proof of it. And so the prosecutor says, okay, well, we're not going to charge him with speeding then, because we don't have proof. They don't say, but this wasn't an exoneration. This doesn't prove he wasn't speeding. Yes, we know that's implicit. It's very rare that anybody who's accused of something can 100% prove that they didn't do what they were accused of. And this is the kind of the mentality that the Democrats have been spinning ever since, for example, we found out about the dossier. Well, prove Trump doesn't like hookers peeing on him in bed. What are you talking about? How do you prove that? Well, prove that Trump he didn't have people that were Russian spies. No, the burden of proof is you're accusing, especially of a crime, but just in general, if you accuse someone of they doing something negative, the burden of proof's on you. That's particularly true in our legal system. If you accuse, our government or prosecutors accuse someone of a crime, they have to prove that that crime was committed. In this case, not only can they not prove that they certainly can't prove the crime of Russia collusion or conspiring with Russians happened. They can't prove that at all. There's no evidence for that. On obstruction, they say we can't exonerate. Not only can they not prove that Trump obstructed justice, they didn't even think that they could make the charge. Remember, the way our system goes is you get charged, and then you get to have a fair trial where you get to argue your innocence. So had they been charged, there's no proof that they would have been able to prove that Trump obstructed justice, and we know that because they didn't even have the confidence to recommend the charge in the first place. So this whole idea of exoneration, yeah, and Pat, you're absolutely right. Mueller had one job. This is why special counsels are stupid in the first place. Now think of what the Democrats are saying here. Mueller basically had one job: to investigate Russia collusion, investigate Russia interference, investigate whether or not people in Trump's team colluded with them, and anything that results from that, and investigate whether or not Trump obstructed justice, and come to a conclusion whether or not that we should bring charges for any of this. So Mueller investigated Russian interference, and he recommended charges against Russian trolls and things like that. He investigated Russian collusion and didn't recommend any charges against any Americans, which, by the way, he did a terrible job, as I could get to later, but that's neither here nor there right now. And he investigated obstruction, and he couldn't recommend charges. He said he refused to say whether or not he would have to even consider recommending charges. So Mueller didn't do the one thing he was accused of, or the one thing he was put in charge for. So then why even have a special... Remember, the House, the Senate, they both have investigative tools. They both can convene grand juries, I believe. Or maybe they can't do grand juries. Nonetheless, they have subpoena power. They could subpoena people. They could have investigated themselves, but no, they needed this special person. And the Democrats told us, yeah, it's Mueller time, baby. Let's get our Mueller vote of candles out. He's going to do it. He's going to bring the fireworks. And then he's like, yeah, no, I'm going to punt. So if that was the case, what do we need Mueller for in the first time? And think of the implications of their holding Barr in contempt. The reason is because there's redactions. Well, do you know who got to see all of the underlying redacted material? Mueller and his team. And second, do you know who helped suggest what should be redacted? Oh, that was Mueller and his team as well. So what the Democrats are literally saying is, well, we need to see the full unredacted version because we think that there could possibly information in there that shows that Trump committed some sort of crime. So the implication then of what they're saying is, we don't trust Mueller's conclusions. If that's the case, why appoint Mueller in the first place? Just do your own damn investigation. But no, they're saying, oh, well, we needed Mueller, and then once it doesn't... Isn't it weird how it always works out this way with the globalist, with this so-called, the establishment Democrat type people? Look at Brexit. Oh, you voted against the globalist agenda? Well, we need another vote. Oh, this investigation proved Trump was innocent? Well, then we need different people to investigate. It's always that way. It's never what they... Remember, just 2 months ago, they were telling Mueller's the final word. He's the final word. Oh, he's a great person. That Mueller's great. Great investigator. He's unbiased. It'll be the final word. And then day one, when Mueller doesn't say what they want, oh, well, we need to see all the information Mueller had. It's absurd. Now, one of the things to remember about all of this is, legally, Mueller did not have to give Congress one piece of paper from Mueller. Not one. He did not have to show the public the Mueller report. He did not have to show the members of Congress Mueller's report. And here's why. Mueller was operating, his boss was the Department of Justice. He was operating as a member of the Department of Justice. This is the executive branch. So just a quick civics lesson. There are 3 branches of government. You have Congress and everything. That's called the legislative branch. They're supposed to write the laws. You have the executive branch, which is the president and all the agencies under him, such as the IRS, the FBI, things like that. Their job is to enforce the laws that Congress writes, the legislative branch writes. And then you have the judicial branch, which is the courts, which are supposed to interpret the laws, right? Oh, my blood pressure's fine. I'm just very excitable. But anyways, so Mueller is operating within the purview of the executive branch, not within the purview of the legislative branch. And so he's basically, and his direct boss would be the Attorney General. Now, if you remember, when the Attorney General at the time of Mueller's appointment was Jeff Sessions, Sessions had recused himself basically from anything dealing with Russia. So that meant it went to the Deputy Attorney General. That was a man by the name of Rod Rosenstein. Rosenstein was not a Trump fan. In fact, there's allegations that he offered to wear a wire to get Trump on tape because he wanted Trump impeached or he wanted Trump removed under, I forget what amendment it is, but basically saying that Trump was mentally unfit to be president. There's been all kinds of back and forth between Rosenstein. Basically, at the very least, we could say, Rosenstein's not some Trump crony. They've butted heads many times. So Rosenstein writes the letter to recommend firing Comey, and then once Trump fires Comey, Rosenstein says, that's weird. I wonder why Trump would fire Comey. I better appoint a special counselor to investigate this. Oh, and I know, I'll pick the very person that Comey would want picked. That whole situation needs dealt with and hopefully will at some point. But nonetheless, at that point, Mueller is then answering to Rosenstein. Rosenstein is answering to Trump, because Rosenstein's under Trump at the executive branch. Trump legally is allowed to fire anyone within the executive branch. He could fire Comey, he could have fired Rosenstein, he could have fired Mueller. Now, that doesn't mean he couldn't have been impeached, because impeachment's a political process. It's not a legal process. Could be. Nonetheless, because this all sounds very confusing, the point I'm trying to make is just quite simply, Mueller's report eventually would be handed to the Department of Justice. The Department of Justice then acts on the Mueller report. So had Mueller suggested charging Trump, at this point now, Barr's the Attorney General. Barr's not recused, so he's now the one that's in charge of Mueller's investigation. And by the way, a slight offshoot, when Barr was in front of the Senate committee, when they go ahead and put him through, he promised two things. He promised, one, that he would make sure that there was no interference and the Mueller report was allowed to be completed, which he did. And second, he would release as much of that information to the public and to Congress as possible, which he did. So he kept both of his promises that he recommended. But nonetheless, he didn't have to. The special counsel's report, Mueller's report, only went to the DOJ. It would have been 100% within the rights of Barr to say, I read the report, here's my conclusion, that's it. It's sealed up. No one's allowed to look at it. Now, there would have been gnashing of the teeth. I personally wanted to see a lot of the report. I would have thought that sucked. But legally, that would have been well within his rights. But instead, Barr kept his promise. And by the way, there were people that are probably smarter than me on this, such as Trey Gowdy, who said, no, it's a mistake to release this report. Because what it is just releasing dirt that'll be used to smear Trump that he won't be able to defend himself. Remember, if you watched my last live stream video, Mueller actually puts, if you go to volume 2, Mueller gives a list of 5 reasons why he didn't even consider whether or not he should recommend charges for obstruction of justice. The third reason he talks specifically about, because if you have some kind of charge like that, if you recommend charges but know that a sitting president can't be charged, what happens is it's just used to smear the president, and he's not allowed to then use the legal system and what our legal system recommends, which is a fair trial, to prove his innocence. And that would stymie a president's agenda and be unfair. Yet that's exactly what Mueller ends up doing. Instead of charging, he just says, well, I won't even consider charges, but here's all the dirt. So go ahead, Democrats and media, and smear this guy and ruin his agenda. So Mueller's a hypocrite just on that note itself. You can check that out. I think it's page 244 of the Mueller report, where he says number 3. Check that out. I read it exactly last week, so I'm not going to read it again, but it's on there. Nonetheless, that was the job. Barr, Gowdy said he shouldn't release it, but he did. So the argument that's being made right now, this is kind of, I'm being long-winded. Basically, I'm saying, legally, Barr did not have to release this, right? He did not have to release any of the Mueller report. To Congress, he did, or certainly to the public, which he did. Nadler and the Democrats' argument is, not only did he have to release it, or now that he's released it, he's obligated to make sure everything's unredacted. And that is garbage. And the Democrats and the media know this. And so the most clear way that it's garbage is some of the material that's redacted is grand jury testimony. It is literally, I forget the name of the law, but this was a law passed by Congress, something 6E. And I've read this, where it talks specifically about grand jury testimony cannot be released by, and it lists a bunch of people, the people that testified, the grand jurors themselves, the judge, any attorneys working for the government, such as the Attorney General, Barr. They're not allowed to release this material. And it makes sense. Consider what a grand jury is. It's secretive testimony. So let's say I'm testifying in a mob trial and there's a grand jury, and I get brought before it to give evidence against some mobster. I know that there's a very secretive process, that there's no chance that my testimony will ever be released to the public. If that process is violated, and I'm now watching right now and I say, holy cow, one of the major political parties in this country, the Democrats, now no longer think grand jury testimony should be secret. They think that on their whim it should be allowed to be released. Then what do you think the chances are of people being convened in front of a grand jury are of wanting to testify if they have material that could embarrass themselves or possibly endanger themselves? Why would you ever do it? You'd be like, no. You literally could start to see where people will be subpoenaed in front of grand juries and go, I refuse to testify. I'm taking the fifth on everything because the Democrats will release my information if they want. Because they're literally asking for Barr to go against sitting law. Now, keep in mind, some of the other reasons for redactions are ongoing investigations, presumably against, like, Russians. And if you listen to the Democrat, remember, it was an act of war. Oh, the Russians attacked. They attacked us. This is one of the most serious attacks. We need to do whatever we can to stop Russian interference. Oh, and also, could you please unredact all this material and jeopardize these investigations into Russians? Because Al Green said it best, the politician, Democratic politician. We need to impeach Trump before he's reelected. Yeah, exactly. So political power is more important to them than stopping Russian interference. But we knew that, didn't we? Because if this was ever about stopping Russian interference way back in 2016, when the FBI started to believe the false accusations that Russians, people in Trump's campaign was nefariously talking to Russians in illegal ways, they would have went to Trump and told him. That, like they did with Feinstein, right? Hey, we think there's spies trying to infiltrate your campaign in this area and this area. Please be careful. But they didn't. Instead, they sent spies. They had wiretaps. Because to them, stopping potential Russian interference was less important than taking Trump down at any cost. Huh. And isn't that weird? That kind of jives with Peter Strzok saying, we need an insurance policy against Donald Trump. That jives with Chuck Schumer telling, was it Stephanopoulos or Maddow, don't criticize the intel community. They'll find 6 ways from Sunday of getting back to you. Isn't that weird how all of those things, circumstantially, it ends up adding up exactly with what happened? Yes, that is what happened. The intel agencies chose, for some reason, for some odd reason, not to brief a presidential candidate that Russians were trying to influence his campaign. Instead, they did the totally unprecedented move of spying on that campaign. But trust them, it wasn't political. They really were worried about the Russians. So it's absolutely asinine. Anyways, getting back to Barr, so they're saying, well, because these portions were unredacted, no, that's what Barr's being held in contempt for, because of these redactions. But there's a couple things to remember. Barr didn't unilaterally redact. Barr worked with Rosenstein, who we've already showed wasn't particularly a Trump fan, and with people in Mueller's team. So again, the implication then seems to be from the Democrats, I guess Mueller and Rosenstein are both involved. They had the evidence that Trump was a Russian spy. They had the evidence that Trump obstructed justice. But they hid it. They were like, no, we did this. Ha ha ha. We'll just redact it. No one will ever see it. Ha ha. It makes no sense at all. But that's what they'll have you believe. Now, another thing. Barr then released basically the copy that me and you got to see of the Mueller report to Congress. But then he took it a step further and did more redactions. So now he unredacted more, but there's a copy that's available to certain members of Congress that basically only has the grand jury testimony redacted. And so in volume 2, which is the volume that that's the one that deals with obstruction, that's all the Democrats want to focus on now because they want you to forget the fact they lied to you about Russia collusion for 2 years. In volume 2, you know how much is redacted in volume 2? You know what this was over? 2 lines and then 2, like 1/4 sections of lines. That's it. So out of a 240-something page document, 2 sentences are redacted, basically. Some of which are in footnotes, by the way. So the Democrats will have you believe those 2 sentences, it's like the whole Mueller report saying like, okay, well, on this thing, well, here's the things that could look bad for Trump, here's the things that could look good for Trump, but our overall conclusion is we're not going to recommend charges. And then in the 2 sentences that are redacted, but yes, we do recommend charges, Trump's a criminal, and that's redacted. It's so stupid. What could possibly be in those 2 sentences that prove that Trump's guilty? But you know what? The Democrats don't even know that. You want to know why? Because they have refused to look at the less redacted copy. They absolutely refuse to look at it. So picture this. You're someone and you say, hey, I want to see this report. I want to see it. And then they give you the report. You go, here you go. Well, I want to see less redactions. Okay, here's less redactions. No, I refuse to look at the less redactions. Now I've demanded I want to see no redactions whatsoever. Now, they know full well that that can't be complied with under the law. And so what this is a manufactured crisis. They were saying, unless Barr breaks the law, then this is a constitutional crisis. It's absolutely insane. And no one pushes back on this. No one. I mean, there are people like me. There are people that maybe you can see in right-wing news sources. But turn on CNN, the New York Times, MSNBC. They're all repeating. It's a constitutional crisis. It's a constitutional crisis. What's the crisis? The Barr refused to break the law? Remember, these are the exact same people that were furious when Comey didn't even break the law but gave dirt on Hillary, but then decided not to charge her. Now they're saying, just 2 years later, after they demanded investigations and that and said that Comey stole the election and this and that and the other, now 2 years later, not only have they done a 180 and they're saying we demand all this dirt be released publicly, but they're saying, and we demand that so much dirt be released that the AG break the law to get that dirt out there. It's asinine. And we see that well, I got a list here. So yeah, if the Democrats really cared, they would look at the further unredacted version. Maybe you could believe them a little better if they said, okay, we all went in and we looked at this further unredacted version, which, by the way, in Volume 2, 99.9% of it is now available to be seen by the Democrats. So had they gone in and looked at that and said, okay, we looked at that, but we still have a question what this one-sentence redaction was, then maybe you could say, all right, well, at least that's a little more believable. But just being children and putting their fingers in there and go, no, I won't look at it. I won't look at it unless it's totally the way I want and the law's broken so I can see it is ridiculous. Now, to play devil's advocate, the argument that you see people making is, well, but the problem is Barr's refusing to even negotiate with the Democrats to release that grand jury testimony. But that's only one side of the story. That's garbage. Barr, even his office actually wrote a letter saying that they were trying to continue to work with the Democrats to meet their demands, but instead the Democrats went through with this contempt charge even before they read, thanks, Pat, even before they read the more unredacted version. They decided to go through with, even before they heard Mueller talk. Mueller's going to testify. Let's assume Mueller says, which I assume he will say, since he didn't recommend charges. Mueller comes out and says, yeah, Barr was correct in the assessment that I didn't recommend charges I didn't see any reason to charge for Russia collusion, and that I neither exonerated nor decided to charge Trump with obstruction of justice. That's what Barr said in his letter that was released 2 weeks before the report was released. That's what the Mueller report says when you could look at it. We know this. If Mueller says that, what's the argument then? Well, Mueller, what about these redacted portions? Yeah, my team also recommended those redactions. Is Mueller in contempt then as well? Is Mueller a bad guy? They didn't even wait to talk to Mueller. They just say, Barr's a liar. Barr's a liar. He's a liar. It's utter stupidity. What more could Barr do to cooperate with the Democrats? Hey, can you break the law for us, Attorney General, whose job is to uphold the law? No, I can't break the law. Well, contempt. Then you're in contempt. Now, let's get to the idea that you hear. And this is one of the reasons that I wanted to bring someone on. Well, before I get to this, what is the possible argumentation that the left is making why this is a constitutional crisis? I don't even know. I can't articulate it. They just repeat buzzwords. I guess if I'm being as generous as possible, they're trying to make the argument Congress has legitimate oversight over the executive branch, and so therefore they should have access to all materials, even unredacted. But there's many, many problems with this. The first of which is at the very basic level, Congress themselves voted on the law that says that they shouldn't have access to grand jury material. It's a law that was written by Congress. So if they feel that they do actually have access to that material, then they should repeal that law or write a new law. You don't get to say, well, we're going to I mean, picture how stupid this is. What they've effectively done is put A.G. Barr in a trap where they're saying either way he breaks the law. If he releases the material, then members of Congress could legitimately say, but here's this law 6E that says you weren't allowed to release that material. You've broken the law. Therefore, you should be held in contempt. If he doesn't release the material, they say, see, but Congress has the ability. Hey, what's up, Robert? They'll say, but see, Congress has oversight authority over the executive. Therefore, Barr's in contempt. No matter what Barr does, if he releases the material, he's in contempt. If he doesn't release the material, he's in contempt. So it's Congress's own fault that they passed that law. Secondly, we know from past experiences that this isn't how Congress has operated in the first place, particularly the ones that are complaining the most. For example, the same people, and I'll talk about this more later, the exact same people that are complaining, we have the Nadlers of the world, right? The Schiffs of the world, all these Democrats, all these media people that are telling you Congress has oversight authority over the executive branch. They have the right to see any of this material, are the same people that for over 2 years now, and even beyond that, if you actually go back further, if you investigate, have cheered and celebrated and smeared anyone who criticized the fact that the FBI refuses to hand over materials to the oversight committees. Absolutely refuses. And when they do, there are redactions that make no sense whatsoever. Remember, the media said to even question, if we had to have these unredacted, it would jeopardize sources and methods. This is an attack on law enforcement. You're un-American for even wanting to see this material. That's what the media told us. That's what Schiff told us. That's what Nadler told us. So when Nunes and Grassley were writing their memos about the FISA warrant, which we still haven't seen unredacted, by the way, and they said, we want these FISA reports. We want to see this material from the FBI. We demand to see it. Schiff and Nadler and all them were out on TV with these same media people saying, no, we have no right to see that. This is an attack on our law enforcement agencies. The FBI needs to keep that information redacted. The same damn people 1 year earlier. Now they've totally revised their position. And then you actually had people like Rand Paul saying, okay, I'm for the release of the Mueller report. I'm for the release of the background information, as long as we attach to the recommendation of that from the Senate or from Congress, also saying we also want the release of all the FBI materials as well. And what did the Democrats say about that? No, that's different. So the Democrats' position is, well, we as Congress have oversight of the executive branch, and we're allowed to see any materials we want. Except when Eric Holder wanted to withhold material. Except when the FBI or the CIA wants to withhold material. In fact, what we're really saying is we just want to see anything that could possibly be damaging to Trump. How can you take seriously people that literally one day will say, yes, we have the authority to see all this, and then the very next day say, we don't have that authority, and you're hurting America from even suggesting that we do? How can you take this seriously? And yet, it's a constitutional crisis. It's a constitutional crisis. That's what they're saying. So now, the big discussion I think that there's to be had that you see all these Democrats making, again, just to go back to the top real quick. Remember, they lied to you about Russia collusion. They want to focus on obstruction. They think Trump's tweets or Barr not releasing unredacted stuff's obstruction. But they didn't have a problem with Hillary's team deleting subpoenaed material. Had no problem with that. That wasn't obstruction. So they're liars. You know they are. But now there's this question of, they're saying, did Barr lie in his testimony? So just to give a little background on this, Barr testified in front of the House, I believe it was April 9th, if I'm remembering correctly. And then he also testified here a week or so ago. And there are two questions that were asked in the April 9th questioning, or what's the word I'm looking for, the April 9th testimony of Barr, that the Democrats are saying that Barr lied about. And that's why Barr should be put in cuffs and he should have to resign and this and that and the other. So let's talk about specifically what these two questions were. I was hoping to bring someone on to argue with me, because what you end up, if you're on blog, like I'm on this blog Above Top Secret and other places like that, and when you argue with people, they just say, well, no, it's just your opinion and I know that Barr lied. I just know it. And so I wanted to have someone to sit down. I would have been polite and been like, explain to me why you think Barr lied. Here's my position, and see if we can get to the bottom of it. Because you'd never see this. It's just talking heads. You know, turn on CNN and it's a panel of 8 people all agreeing with each other. So you never get to see people actually clash with these ideas. Here are the two questions, and you could look up yourself the transcripts and see that I feel that I'm paraphrasing these questions reasonably. The first question that was asked that they say that he lied about was, does Mueller agree with all of your conclusions? Because remember, Barr releases this letter. And so here's how it worked. Mueller finishes his report, and within the weeks leading up to the finish of the report, Barr claims that he was in talks with Mueller and Mueller's team. So they kind of had a good idea of the direction it was going. So Mueller finishes his report. Barr gives the conclusions of the report. The conclusions basically say this. 3 things. 1, yes, Russians interfered. Here were some of the Russians that were charged with interfering. Okay. No one's really disputing that. I think I'm the only person that has a problem with that angle of it because I don't care about Russian Facebook trolls that were using Pokemon Go ads at all. $500,000 in an election that over $1 trillion was spent on advertising. It's stupid. It's a red herring. It's used by establishment Republicans and Democrats to brump up this horrible boogeyman of Russia. Now, allegations that they maybe hacked emails, that's more serious. But these trolls, it's so stupid. I mean, you can't believe that that it's still being taken seriously. It's so dumb. But nonetheless, so Barr's letter says, yes, Russians interfered. Whatever. We'll leave that there for now. Democrats aren't really arguing with that anyways. Second thing it says is, there was no conspiring with Trump, anyone in his campaign, or even any American with Russians to influence the election. So there were no charges given there. Okay, pretty simple. Democrats aren't really arguing that. They want you to forget about the Russia stuff because they lied to you for 2 years. Now the third thing, this is where all of them were saying, and I did a video immediately. Nadler came out immediately, like the week after Barr had this letter and said that this was a lie. Barr's letter, then the third part says, when it comes to obstruction, Mueller decided that he didn't want to decide whether or not charges should be recommended. But he was not recommending charges, nor was he exonerating Trump. And Barr actually quotes the section from the Mueller report where he says that. This is where people are saying that Barr lied. Now, it is absolutely asinine. The entire argument is focusing on Barr's summary or Barr's conclusions, Barr's letter. Who the hell cares about that letter when you could pick up the Mueller report and see it yourself? So I constantly have people saying, oh, but see, according to Mueller's letter and Barr's letter, there was some kind of tension there. Show me in the Mueller report show me anywhere in that report where what Barr said in that letter is not accurate. Go ahead. Instead, they'll say, well, someone on Vox, here's an article from Vox. No, here's what Mueller said in his letter. Show me in the damn report. Who cares what the summary says? You have the report. 2 weeks? That's what we're complaining about? Because you had to wait 2 weeks from when Barr put his letter out to when you actually, as the public, not even as Congress, you as the public, got to see the report. 2 weeks. And that's what all this hubbub's about? And no one even reads the report. I think I'm the only moron that sat down and read it. Because I'm listening to all these people tell me that I'm wrong, that Barr lied, and I'm like, where? Show me in the report. Show me. Where does it say? Because my reading of this section of obstruction said that Mueller said we don't think a sitting president could be charged, so we didn't even look at it whether or not we should recommend charges. And we're not recommending charges, but we're also not exonerating Trump. If we thought we had evidence to exonerate him, we would state that. Well, that sounds an awful lot like what Barr said in his letter. Mueller's anger was, but I don't like to... Because then what happens is Barr releases this letter. Then we later find out that Mueller basically sent a letter to Barr and was like, I don't like the way the media is covering this. Can you release more information? And Barr picks up the phone and calls him like a man and says, no, I'm not going to release more information. We're a week away from me releasing the whole damn report anyways. So why release just 19 pages now and then next week release the full 400? Makes no sense. Let's just finish the redaction process and release it all. So question 1, that's kind of the background. Question 1, did Mueller agree with your conclusions? Barr's like, yeah, as far as I'm aware, he agreed with it. Well, that was a lie. And the reason it was a lie was, this is what the Democrats say, the reason it was a lie was because Mueller actually sent this letter to Barr saying that he had a problem. But that letter never said he disagreed with the conclusions. In fact, Barr testified that he actually called Mueller and said, are you saying this letter was inaccurate? Are you saying these aren't the conclusions reached? And Mueller says, no, that's not what I'm saying. But I want more information out there as how we came to this conclusion. In other words, the conclusion is correct, but I feel like the story of how we reached that conclusion is not being given to the American people, which Barr basically says, so what? In 2 weeks, they'll have the whole report and they can read everything you wrote. So he didn't lie. That is not a lie. There is no. Now, maybe Mueller, when he testifies, will say, I disagree with the conclusions of Barr in his letter. It'll be a very interesting testimony if he says that, because the counter to that is, show me in your report where that's inaccurate then. Mueller's a baby. Mueller's job was never to get to the bottom of Russian interference. I've done tons of videos on this. I've talked about that. If that was the case, then he would have been investigating the biggest example of Russian interference, which was Hillary Clinton paying a foreign spy to go to Russians to get lies that were then used to smear Trump up until this day. That's been the biggest effect on our system, on our country, by far. The FBI took it seriously. They used it as an excuse to spy on Trump's team. The media took it seriously. They're using it until, as we speak today, to smear Trump. Sourced from Russians. Yet Mueller didn't get around. He didn't have time to look into those Russians. And people say, how do you know? Maybe it was in some of the unredacted portion. So you're telling me that the biggest example of Russian influence, merited half a page redaction? Ridiculous. If Mueller was really concerned about Russian interference, that would have been a large portion of his report. And it wasn't. We haven't seen any example that he talked about it whatsoever. Isn't that weird? Just like every single time Mueller did something. If the Democrats did something, or people connected to Hillary did something, like fail to register as a foreign lobbyist, like the Podesta group, they get a slap in the wrist and weren't charged with any crimes. If the Republicans did the same thing, like Manafort, then he looked at 2 years in jail for it. Over and over and over, it was, Mueller's team focuses on any connections with Russians Trump's team has. Mueller's team totally ignores any connections with Russians that the Hillary team has. But nonetheless, that's the first time they're saying Barr lied. That was not a lie. There is no evidence right now, none, that Mueller disagreed with the conclusions in Barr's letter. And not only is there no evidence that Mueller disagreed, but even if he somehow tries to claim he later does, which he hasn't, so everyone saying we know Barr lied is full of it. They could say there's a chance Barr lied, but the underlying evidence, the background evidence, is the actual damn report, the Mueller report. You could look through it yourself. Show me where Barr lied. No one could do it. No one. All these intelligent people, all these Democrats, all these media people, no one could do it. They just say, well, Mueller sent a letter, so that proves he didn't agree with the conclusions. No, it doesn't. Mueller didn't like how the media was spinning it. Mueller wanted the media to destroy Trump. He couldn't come up with the goods. Trump didn't commit a crime, but Mueller doesn't like Trump, just like his boy Comey doesn't like Trump. And so we still need to smear this guy in any way possible. Remember what Schumer told us? Because if you go after the intel community, Trump, they'll find 6 ways from Sunday of getting back to you. Well, what do you think Mueller's part of? Oh yeah, former head of the FBI. Was involved in the Uranium One scandal. Any wonder that he would complain that the media didn't eat Trump alive after his own report said, begrudgingly, we can't find any evidence that Trump broke laws. Question number 2. This is the second thing that they say Barr lied about. Representative Christ asked Barr in the April 9th meeting. He said, let me see how this went down here. Are you aware, there have been reports from the media that people in Mueller's team are unhappy with the accuracy of your letter and that you didn't release more information. Were you aware of this? And Barr says something to this effect. Well, no, but they're probably saying that they wish that I would release more of the underlying summary. It's not in my interest to release summaries. I just released the conclusions, and then I'll be releasing the full report. In a nutshell, that's what Barr said. Democrats are saying that's a lie. And why is that a lie? Excuse me. Because we know this is the Democrat speaking. We know that Barr was aware of people on Mueller's team being unhappy with his letter because Mueller sent the letter. But two things on this. One, that was Mueller himself. The question wasn't, are you aware that Mueller? It was, are you aware of the fact that people on Mueller's team? So Barr, who thinks he's friends with Mueller, who gets this letter from Mueller that he's like, what? He said it felt snitty. So he picks up the phone and calls Mueller and is like, dude, I thought we kind of were working together on this. Oh, by the way, something that's important to mention right here. Barr, before he released his letter to the public, said, hey, excuse me, Mueller, would you like to read this letter? And Mueller says, no, I would not. So Mueller's like, nope, no reason for me to read this letter. And then Barr releases the letter, and then Mueller gets upset and says, this is jeopardizing everything I did, and I don't like this letter. You should have released more info. I don't like how the press is talking about this. And so Barr calls him up and says, so wait, you're saying my letter was inaccurate? No, I'm just saying that it didn't say things in exactly the way I would have said them, and I don't like the way the media is treating it. If you felt that way, Mueller, why didn't you read the damn letter before he released it? Like it was offered to you. Almost as if you just wanted to set up for the Democrats to be able to spin some kind of crazy story. Huh, isn't that interesting? Anyways, that was Mueller himself. Barr talked to Mueller himself. There is no evidence that Barr was aware that people on Mueller's team were unhappy. He talked to Mueller. He knew that Mueller wasn't happy with the way the media was spinning things. He wanted more information in the letter. Now people will say, oh, but this is splitting hairs. Mueller's team, that could include Mueller himself. Absolutely stupid. So if I were to say, people in Trump's team are unhappy that Trump fired Comey, does that mean maybe I'm talking about Trump himself? No. That means I'm talking about his team members. People on Tom Brady's team are upset with the refs in the last game. You think I'm talking about Tom Brady when I say that? No, I'm talking about his teammates. If I met Tom Brady, I would say Tom Brady and people on his team are upset with the refs call. Just like if this Chris asking this question met Mueller, he would have said, there are reports that Mueller and people on his teams were unhappy with your letter. Okay, but that's not what he asked. So one, there's no proof that Barr, to this day, had received any comments that people on Mueller's team were unhappy with his letter. Number two, what were they unhappy with? Chris says they wanted more info released and the accuracy. Barr correctly says, I have heard no reports that what I released was inaccurate. Even Mueller himself agrees it was inaccurate. So when you ask me, are you aware that people on Mueller's team had problems with the accuracy of your letter? I am not. Because it's accurate. No one told me it was inaccurate. So it's not a lie. And the people say, well, but it's misleading. He should have said, well, actually, I talked to him. Why? He had no reason to. What this was all about, the real crime with the letter, what they're pissed about is they spent 2 years spinning a lie that Trump colluded with Russians and Mueller was going to bring him down, and they're pissed off they didn't get 2 more weeks to do it. You had people like Brennan going on national television every night while we were waiting for the Mueller report the final couple weeks. Oh, I know more people are going down. Trump Jr.'s going down. They did it. We've seen the evidence. It's there. People like Clapper saying the same thing. Meanwhile, a president that was duly elected's agenda is basically grinded to a halt because all we're talking about is Russia, 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 the Mueller report. And the Russia thing with lies. 2 years of lies. Probably cost the Republicans, if not the House, some of the seats in the House. By the way, how long did Mueller know that there was not any evidence of Russian collusion, that he wasn't going to charge anyone with conspiring with Russians? Some reports are saying he knew for over a year. So why wouldn't he come out and say, okay, there was no conspiring with Russians, but I'm still going to look at obstruction? He already split it into Volume 1 and Volume 2. Almost like he wanted to hold on as long as possible to help the Democrat. Isn't that weird? Trust us, he was unpartisan. It's just every decision he made. Here's a Republican and a Democrat that committed the same crime. Let the Democrat go, charge the Republican. Here's Russians, the same Russian connected with Trump's team and with Hillary's team. We won't look at the Hillary team dealing with that Russian, and we'll just look at the Trump team. Every single decision Mueller made. Oh, what's that? There's evidence that Strzok and Page, the phones I gave them, they may have been saying things that showed they were biased against Trump. I'll destroy those phones. Oh, I'm not happy with the press saying that this shows that there's no charges against Trump and we can move on. I'm not happy with that. It's like every single thing Mueller did was geared towards being a PR win for the Democrats. Isn't that strange? This super unbiased, couldn't be bothered to look into the actual biggest Russia collusion, the Kremlin agents that Hillary Clinton, through an intermediary, paid to get dirt on Trump that was then used. And we're finding out, by the way, more and more and more every day. Reports just this week that there was actually, what was her name, Kavalik, a woman who was in the Obama administration that took notes 10 days before the Christopher Steele dossier was used for a FISA warrant against Carter Page, showing that there were glaring inaccuracies, such as one of the inaccuracies was the payments that were going to Carter Page was through the Russian embassy in Miami. Whoops, there's no Russian embassy in Miami. Yet you say this facts to people. You know what I got in reading in response to this, people that are defending this? Well, that's just one person's opinion. That doesn't mean her facts were right. Oh, okay. Can you show me the Russian embassy in Miami? You see how stupid this is? How far people are willing to overlook reality and spread lies? This isn't a question of opinion. Is there a damn Russian consulate in Miami? No? Okay, then Steele was wrong about that. That's a pretty damn big inaccuracy. That should have been mentioned. When the FBI's admitting, they fully admitted at this point, they didn't verify any of the information in the dossier. They just thought that Steele was credible and honest. Well, this woman, 10 days before that was used, said, and I think he's talking to the media, and I think a lot of this information is suspect, and we're now finding out that Steele basically admitted that this needed to come out before the election because he had political motivations, but none of this was told to the FISA court. Yet somehow, Mueller didn't get around to that. Mueller didn't get around to looking at the dossier. He's concerned about election interference. Didn't get to that, right? They don't care about facts. That's why I wanted to bring someone on. Now, granted, I'm more heated. I would be more polite if I was talking to someone, even if they disagreed with me. Barr didn't lie. Barr legally is not allowed to release grand jury testimony. This is not a constitutional crisis. That is a talking point put out from the DNC to their media allies. Now, you turn on, go watch a clip of Tucker last night where over and over. 15 people in the media and Democrats all saying, this is a constitutional crisis, constitutional crisis, constitutional crisis. Why did I vote for Trump? Does Trump do everything that I like? No. His national debt spending I don't like. I didn't like him bombing Syria, Sometimes I think the tweets are beneath him. I think that he capitulated on the budget with the wall, not having spending for the wall. There's tons of things I could say. I still like Trump. I still support him. I'm still going to vote for him unless something drastic changes. But the number one reason I voted for Trump was this. I'm someone who's been saying for years that at the top levels of the Republican and Democratic Party, it's like this big establishment game. And there's all these people that influence our government, the people like me and you, regular people. I don't care if you're a Republican, Democrat, Green Party, Libertarian, whatever. Our voice seems to oftentimes not be heard, Let's take, one of the situations that irked me the most. In 2008, you had these bank bailouts. And I remember you'd see these pictures. Republican candidate supports the bank bailout. Democratic candidate supports the bank bailout. Then all the other five, minor parties, the Constitutional Party, Libertarian Party, Green Party, right? Even the Communist Party, they're all against it. But we were to believe, based on watching our crap mainstream media and listening to these politicians, well, there's only one answer. There's no disagreement. Same with the war in Iraq. Same with war in Syria. Same with Libya. All these establishment voices on those big issues always seem to agree. And my dream election at that time, though I'm starting to discount the second portion of this, was Trump versus Bernie. Because at least, even if they weren't outsiders, they had the appearance of outsiders enough that it clearly scared the establishment because they screwed Bernie over and then they did everything they could to screw Trump over. But Hillary was the ultimate insider. That's who they wanted. How else do you explain you had people like Jeb Bush and John McCain and Jeff Flake that spent 8 years telling us Hillary's the absolute worst person that could be elected, that just like that flipped and went against the Republican whose policies they agreed with most of, but he was just so unlikable because of his tweets and his brass nature that now the person they spent 8 years telling us was evil and we couldn't elect was their choice. How else do you explain that? Because it was more about maintaining power from these establishment people at the top than it was for anything else. They don't want an outsider more than anything else. And this has been true for years and years. It used to be, I'm going to butcher this story, but you used to have the debates for president was held by the National Women's League, or something to that. I'm butchering the name, and I do apologize. But basically, it was this organization of women that were interested in politics, and they used to have the honor of hosting the presidential debates. They would oftentimes try to get third parties on. And basically, in the late 80s, the Republicans and Democrats came together and said, no, we don't want any third parties. And so the Women's League bowed out and was like, we're not going to be part of something that's just two voices that basically agree on everything. We don't want part of that. Their point was, we want serious debate. We want different voices. And so they bowed out. Well, that's just one example. That's, to me, I was called a conspiracy theorist for thinking that. Now, am I saying that the Republican down the street or the Democrat that runs for your school council, or even every House of Representative member that's a Democrat or a Republican, or no, I'm not saying everyone's involved in this. I'm just saying the people at the highest levels. And there's a lot of unelected people, wealthy business people or defense contractors or intelligence agency people. Some people call that the deep state. Call it whatever you want. You get made fun of if you call it the deep state. But whatever, that group, the group that really makes the decisions on the important things, like bailing out bankers or going to foreign wars, things like that. They don't care about gay rights. They don't care about abortion. That's just bones they throw us to argue about. That's why I wanted Trump. That's what I voted for him. And I knew that the media was part of that. That was my claim. And I was called, oh, you're a conspiracy theorist. Oh, you're so full of it. Oh, come on now. Oh. And wouldn't you know, everything that I suggested, by the mere fact that Trump was elected, has been proven true. The media is out of themselves as the clowns they are. They're just part of the globalist establishment Democrat agenda. Not even left-wing, right? You might say, oh, here's Rob again just bashing left. No. Why are they bashing left-wing people like Tulsi Gabbard? She's a real left-wing. Now, I disagree with Tulsi on a lot of her progressive policies, but one of the things I agree with her is being critical on military interventions, that should be something Congress should be voting on, that shouldn't be executive authority. She's lambasted for that opinion by Democrats and Republicans alike. In fact, the only person I've seen that gave her a fair shake was Tucker Carlson. Oh, by the way, I did part of a live chat yesterday where there was someone from England that was a left-leaning person talking about how bad Tucker is. He just supports the Republicans all the time. That's not true. He's constantly going against the Republicans. He's been critical of the Venezuela position, the Syria position, the massive debt spending, the fact that they won't do anything about tech regulation. He's called Trump out on all of those avenues. Guess who he had on last night and was supporting? Andrew Yang, the Democrat candidate that's proposing things I disagree with, like universal basic income. But what he was promoting last night was forcing companies like Amazon to pay some form of tax, which I'm for. So Tucker's just this extreme right-wing robot that only says what Republicans like. Why does he have people like Tulsi Gabbard on? Why is he against all these Republican war positions? Well, by the way, that's a misnomer. It's not Republican war positions. It's establishment war positions because the Democrats are just for it. Remember, the only time that you've seen MSNBC or CNN or the New York Times praise Trump and say that he's acting presidential is when he was dropping bombs on Syria. That was it. That was the only time he was presidential. It's asinine. But that's what I'm saying. These media, they're outed for what they are. They're not journalists. That doesn't mean all of them, but that's 95% of them in the mainstream media. They're just mouthpieces. They lied to you about the Iraq war. And once it was found that they lied, they said, our bad, we won't do that again. Then 10 years later, they're telling you, not only do you have to trust those same intelligence people again, but if you even dare to criticize them, you're hurting America. 10 years after they said, we're sorry, we were lied to by these intel people, we won't let it happen again. Now they're saying, not only are we not going to be critical of them, but we'll attack you if you're critical of them. So fat guys like me on a couch have to do more journalistic work than the actual journalists are doing. And God help you if you're a journalist that rocks the boat. Why do you think Glenn Greenwald, who again, I talk about Glenn Greenwald all the time. I wish I could talk to the guy. We disagree on almost social programs. He's a progressive. I'm not a progressive at all. But at least we have integrity. We're willing to tell the truth when it comes to crap like this. He's willing to say, no, this Russia collusion thing was crap. No, this war is crap. Dropping bombs on Syria was crap. Just like Tucker was willing to say. Tucker and Glenn's on his show all the time. And they disagree with probably 90% of each other's political positions. But they respect the fact that they're both willing to say unpopular things because it's what they believe. Anyways, Trump outed the media and what I call the deep state, these intel community. Now, I'm not one of these people that's like, 4D chess. Every move Trump makes is, carefully planned ahead. No, Trump had to do very little. His mere existence and the fact he won prompted these morons to out themselves. Trump could stop tweeting and talking for 6 months today. He could stop. And the media is going to continue to look like asses and prove that they're not interested in journalism, as will the intel community. Now, people will argue with me, well, is Trump really an outsider? I think he is, but even let's say you don't think he is. That's not what's important. The important part is the intel community thought he was. Here was a guy in his second debate with Hillary who said, why are we fighting Russians? Why are we against Assad again? Aren't the people that are fighting Assad like ISIS and al-Nusra, aren't those the real enemy? Why wouldn't we be working with Assad and Russia to attack them? And the media went nuts. The intel community went nuts. We can't have a guy like, wait a minute. You mean to tell me there could be a guy leading the military in this country that doesn't believe that we should arm ISIS in one country and fight them in the next? We can't have that. Now, Trump's fallen short on a lot of these policies. He bombed Syria, like I said. I don't know what to think of the situation in Venezuela, but I don't like communism at all. I think that, what's his name? Maduro seems like a terrible president. But I'm not for military intervention. I don't think we should be responding to places militaristically unless we have definitive proof that there's really bad stuff going on and that we can somehow help. Who do I trust? The intel community that lies to me over and over and over and over again? Lied to me about Iraq. Lied to me about Libya. Lied to me about Syria. Lied to me about Trump-Russia collusion. Lied about the Gulf of Tonkin. But trust them this time. And so it was kind of good to see Trump come out and say, I feel like Bolton's trying to get me into a war with Venezuela. I don't know about this. Yes, he needs to trust his gut more. He has the right gut feelings on this stuff. By the way, I'm a racist bigot, and so is Trump, because I believe this stuff, because I don't want to bomb these other countries. The real non-racist are the progressives, the Obama people, the Hillary people that want to just kill all these people and have these foreign, going into Libya and wiping those people. Those are the real non-racists. People like me that don't want to bomb those people. We're the racists. So damn stupid. So yeah, Trump, by virtue of his winning, he's out. Now, why am I bringing all this up now? Because we saw how insane the media is, and how they've added themselves. This, to me, is just another pinnacle of that. It's like they can't get more insane every day. Like the Covington kid and the Kavanaugh are still the two worst. Right, yeah, you're absolutely right, Milo. That's exactly what I was saying. The Covington and the Kavanaugh situation was the media at their worst, but this is another example. The Democrats and the media are out there saying it is a constitutional crisis because Barr refuses to break the law that these Democrats signed in Congress to release information that he never had to release in the first place. And it's being repeated verbatim. Constitutional crisis. Constitutional crisis. It's a constitutional crisis. And if you're just the average person, it sounds very confusing. There's all this, was there can Trump use executive privilege? And what exactly is this law saying? Wait a minute, there's things redacted. Does that mean Trump's trying to hide things? If you're just someone who's not like a loser like me that has time to look into this stuff every day, it gets really confusing. You just turn on the news and you hear, oh my God, it's a constitutional crisis. You mean the Congress has the right to see this information and Trump's purposely withholding it from them? No! That's not at all what's going on. And they know it. The media knows it, and so do the Democrats. But they know, they've learned, if you repeat the lie enough over and over and over again, then it has the given effect. There's no consequences for these lies. Was there a consequence for them lying about Russia collusion? for 2 years? No, none whatsoever. They literally patted themselves on the back. You had people check on my video with Morning Joe, right? They were incensed, angered that people had the audacity to call them out for being wrong. How dare you? You ought to be ashamed of yourself for calling out the media for lying about that story. You're disgusting. Here we go. More attacks on the media. That's how they acted. And so now they just say this. It's a constitutional crisis. It's a crisis. And it's not. And yeah, you're right, Milo. I was talking about this also a little earlier. There is if Barr, they have set up a situation where no matter what Barr does, they're saying he should be held in contempt. If Barr doesn't release the redacted information, then they're saying he's in contempt because Congress has the right to see that because they have oversight authority over the executive. If he does release the information, unredacts it, then they could legitimately say, oh, but you violated this law 6E that says you can't release grand jury testimony, so you're in contempt as well. They've literally set the position up where no matter what action Barr takes, they're saying he's in contempt. That's the constitutional crisis. The constitutional crisis started, well, it started before this, but was personified in the Kavanaugh hearings when they started to say guilty until innocent. You have to prove that you're innocent if someone accuses you of rape based on your genitals. If you're the wrong sex, then we don't believe you. If you're a woman and you're making accusatory statements, then we believe you no matter what. It's up to the man to prove that he didn't have. Oh, that unless you're accusing a Democrat, Fairfax Lieutenant Governor of Virginia or Keith Ellison. No. We don't just believe those accusers, but anyone who just accuses a Republican man. It's difficult. Basically, Republicans always guilty, Democrats always innocent. That's, the easiest way. But you watch my videos from back then, I'm like, this is crazy. This is destroying the foundation of this country, the legal system of this country, of innocent until proven guilty. Now just, the Covington things. We saw the same thing. We had to take the stance of black adult racists and a Native American adult who was siding with those racists over children because they wore the wrong color hat. Because of cultural Marxism. I said, this is insane. This shows how crazy the media is. Now we have the media and the Democrats saying, if you refuse to break the law to give us what you want, then you're encouraging a constitutional crisis. It's ridiculous. So where else is it? Why is the media's... Do you hear them talking about constitutional crisis left and right? Why wasn't it a constitutional crisis when Eric Holder refused to give over documents? I don't recall hearing that. In fact, I recall hearing the exact opposite. I recall hearing all these same media mouthpieces saying, oh, this is just political theater by the Republicans holding Holder in contempt. But now it's a constitutional crisis. I didn't see many Republicans saying it was a constitutional crisis when Holder refused to give that material over. Now let's talk about the difference between Holder and Barr, because here's one of the things that happened. Both sides can rightly say this, and this is one of the things that upsets me about politics. And it's true, the Republicans do this as well. If I give one piece of advice is never be a party first person, Stick to yourself. If you're saying something, just because someone, and it's true of anything in life. Maybe you look up to someone, a mentor, a teacher, or a father or something. Still be your own person. If we're all critically thinking and being honest, there's not one person that's ever existed that totally agrees with everything we say. And so that means, by extension, there wouldn't be one political party that totally agrees with everything we say. So I do try to hold, even though I'm a Republican, and I want them to do well, I try to call them out as well when they're doing things. And so let's be honest. Both Republicans and Democrats do this. They'll flip-flop on positions like within the span of a couple years, And so we had Republicans that were furious about Eric Holder and wanted to hold him in contempt and thought it was important. But now they're saying it's all just political theater. And if you reverse, you had Democrats that were saying it was political theater when Eric Holder was held in contempt. But now they're saying that it's a constitutional crisis. This is something that needs to happen. So we should call out both sides. But I think that I could argue that there is significant differences between Eric Holder's situation and Barr's situation. And significant in the manner that it makes what Holder did way worse than what Barr's doing. And so if all these people back then didn't think it was a constitutional crisis when Holder was doing it, then what in the world are they talking about now with Barr? It's the same thing of, if you think Trump's mean tweets and suggested maybe firing Mueller was obstruction, even though he didn't go through with it, but you don't think that Hillary's team destroying subpoenaed evidence was obstruction, then you're clearly a partisan hack. There's no getting, you're refusing to acknowledge reality. I mean, it's that simple. So we've already talked about what Barr's being held in contempt for, because he won't release a fully unredacted version to Congress. By the way, why does Congress want a fully unredacted version? So they could leak stuff. That's why. Just like they've been doing all along. They want to leak more dirt. Anyone close to Trump, anything that might sound bad about Trump in there. That's what they want. And they want to smear Barr in any way possible, because then this is the real agenda. They know, or at least they fear, and we'll see, I hope Barr does come through on this, that Barr's going to investigate the start of the investigation into Russia. Which means, whoops, that scandal-free Obama administration, turns out they committed basically the biggest scandal in the history of American politics. Spying on their presidential opponent, their party's presidential opponent. Using the FBI, the CIA. Using known lies. Research that they paid for. And so they need to smear Barr, because once Barr starts that investigation... Ironically, by the way, remember, Trump committed obstruction because he smeared Mueller. That was their claim. So if now the Democrats are being looked into by Barr and they're smearing Barr, isn't that obstruction as well? Oh, no, it's different this time. As always, over and over again, when the Democrats do it, it's okay. Now, I don't think it's obstruction on either side. I think that the Democrats should be allowed to be out there smearing Barr. I don't care. Just like Trump was allowed to smear Mueller. Don't care. To me, it's not obstruction either way. Nonetheless. But that's what it's about. That's why they're attacking Barr. So, yeah, real quick, let me talk about the executive privilege part. Barr requested that Trump sign for executive privilege, and the reason was that it gives him more defense right now not to release that material, right? It makes it very clear-cut. If executive privilege is called, now it may be ruled that executive privilege is unwarranted, which I feel it should be ruled that way, and it probably will be. The problem is we can see with the Holder situation. You know when that was resolved with the Holder situation? Last month. So by the time this is resolved, it'll be 2-3 years from now. It'll be too late. So basically, Barr's being put in a vice saying you have to break the law, or you're being held in contempt. And one of the things he could do to make it easier on him right now is for Trump to say, well, I'm just calling him executive privilege. Now it's not Barr's decision, so why would he be held in contempt? But they still voted to have a contempt holding. That's why executive privilege was claimed, though. But anyways, so let's talk about the difference between the Holder and what Barr did. So Barr, again, refused to release. He complied with the law saying he couldn't release unredacted information. So he followed the law. That's why he's being held in contempt. And people are saying, well, it's the same thing. He's refusing to give Congress documents. That's what Holder did. But there's many differences. Holder refused to give over documents that would make Holder himself look bad. The redactions in the Mueller report aren't going to smear Barr. Barr's not going to be mentioned anywhere in the Mueller report. He had nothing to do with the Russia investigation or obstruction. He was brought on well after. So Holder had an incentive not to release this information because it particularly affected him personally. Secondly, under the Holder situation, this was the investigation. Congress was doing the investigation of Fast and Furious and needed the evidence for it. No one ever got that evidence. Holder's withholding that evidence. Now, counter that to what's going on in the Barr situation. In the Barr situation, the investigation was done by Mueller, and they got all of the evidence. So on one hand, Holder's saying no investigator may see this evidence. On the other hand, Barr's saying the investigator already saw the evidence and is himself recommending that parts of it be redacted. It's a completely different situation. But it's different. It's similar in this sense. Both cases were attorney generals not giving information. It's just Barr has a reason to do so, and Holder doesn't. At the very least, if I'm being as charitable as possible, let's say, okay, fine, it's the exact same thing. Even though it's not, as I've just argued, but let's say that I'm being charitable and say, okay, if it wasn't a constitutional crisis when Holder did it, then it's not a constitutional crisis now. And so all these people, but again, it's about repeating the lie over and over and over and over again. And hoping that you can influence enough people. People don't like Trump, you know. He's an abrasive character, so they're more willing to believe this. It's being repeated by, it's not just the news. That's what the academia is saying. That's what all the late night comics are saying. It's what everyone in Hollywood's saying. It's what all the people in Silicon Valley believe. In fact, they'll censor conservative views. If you control the narrative enough, it doesn't matter if you have the truth. Wasn't it Hitler that said that? You tell a big enough lie, everyone will believe it. You don't want to tell a little lie. Tell the big lie. They still are spouting this Russia collusion garbage. But that's the difference. So think of all the double standards here. Trump mean tweets is obstruction. Hillary deleting subpoenaed evidence, not obstruction. Holder withholding evidence so no investigator could see it. Not really a big deal. That's just political theater by Republicans. Barr refusing to break the law that Congress themselves wrote, saying grand jury testimony can't be released to them. And releasing even more, other than that grand jury testimony, releasing so Congress could see all that information, but Congress refuses to look at it. And an investigator's already looked at all that information. That's a constitutional crisis. Manafort fails to register as a foreign lobbyist. That means he's an asset of Russia. He deserves to go to jail for 2 years. Podesta fails to register as a foreign lobbyist dealing with the exact same pro-Russian interest groups. No big deal. It was just a harmless accident. People on Trump's team supposedly lie to the FBI. Lock them up and throw away the key. People on Hillary's team, including our Hillary herself, according to FBI transcripts of text messages saying FBI agents refused to believe that Hillary thought C meant alphabetical instead of classified. In other words, she lied to the FBI. No problem. Over and over and over again. Trump kicks Acosta out of a press briefing. It's his attacks on the press. What a terrible dictator. Obama wiretaps a press person from Fox that ran stories critical of him and his parents. No big deal. It's over and over. Now, I talked about this briefly, but it's worth saying again. Let me grab a drink real quick if y'all don't mind. It'll just be 30 seconds. Okay, back. Think of what the implications of what the Democrats are saying here, right? Now remember, just because me and you haven't seen that redacted material, remember, it wasn't just redacted by Barr. It was redacted by Barr working with Rosenstein and working with Mueller's team. That's how they decided to come up with these redactions, right? But those groups have all seen the redactions, obviously, including Mueller himself. Now, what Nadler and people are saying is, clearly there could be this is, if we take their argument at face value, what they're saying publicly, there could be something damaging to Trump that shows that he actually did break a law in that redacted material. If you're going to believe that, you have to believe that Mueller's in the bag for Trump. So this person they told us for 2 years is infallible, that he's a professional, he can't be bought, he's nonpartisan, despite all the evidence to the contrary that I've been talking about this whole video, as to why actually it seems that Mueller had every interest in helping the Democrats out and going after Trump as hard as possible. Despite all that evidence, they said, no, he's nonpartisan. Now they want us to believe at the 0 hour after the report comes out, actually, Mueller's a hack. He's either completely incompetent or he's in the bag for Trump. And why? Because Mueller ultimately doesn't recommend any charges, but Nadler and the Democrats know somewhere in that redacted material there's proof that Trump committed a crime. So Mueller had the proof that Trump committed a crime, but inexplicably decided not to charge him. What sense does that make whatsoever? You don't even, how can you take that seriously? And it's funny, it's coming. Mueller's going to testify. I hope Mueller does testify. By the way, I'm against, I understand where Trump's coming from. If you're Trump, why is Trump telling people to refuse subpoenas? Why is Trump claiming executive privilege? Why is Trump saying he doesn't want Mueller to testify? Because he's tired of it. 2 years you're accused of selling out your country. You and your family. Right? 2 years. And you know you're innocent. They're accusing you of getting peed, having hookers pee on beds and, working with Russia to steal the election. Blah, blah. That's all you hear for 2 years. And you're talking to the people doing the investigation, and they say, oh, no, you're not under investigation. But then they're leaking to the media. Oh, look at this. Look how bad Trump is. 2 years, on and on and on. And finally, after this investigation, you wanted to fire this, the guy that was running the investigation. You were like, this investigation's garbage. It shouldn't even be going on. This is just all witch hunt. It's a political attack against me. And finally, the very person that your enemies picked, nominated as the person to bring you down, even that person releases their report and says, yeah, sorry, the goods aren't there. And you're like, finally, vindication. And no. Now it's just, this was just step one. More subpoenas, more evidence, more discussion of this. On and on and on. And Trump's probably just like, I'm done with this. Done. Stop. Over. And I love, you hear people like Ben Shapiro and other conservatives, they'll say like, well, Trump should just go along. How long? Let's say he gets elected again. 8 years? Just 8 years of this? There needs to be another investigation of Trump. If he's upset, it looks bad for him. He just has to nod his head and say, yes, I'm sorry. Please have another investigation. At some point, the guy's human. He's going to say, this is ridiculous. My contention's been all along, I don't care. Leave no stone unturned. Go after Trump as hard as you want, as long as you're willing to do the same thing to everyone else. That's fine. You want to drain the swamp? Let's raid every person in Washington's lawyer in the middle of the night. Let's do that. Bet we find way more dirt than they found on Trump, on most of them. Tax returns and stuff. Let's have a fine-tooth investigation of everyone's finances in Washington. See how they're getting so wealthy. Nope, that's just reserved for Trump. All of this is always reserved for Trump. All these laws. Remember when they were saying that he broke the, the Logan Act? Because Flynn broke the Logan Act because he was talking to Russians before Trump was sworn in. People break the Logan Act all the time. How many times has Jimmy Carter been talking to enemies? John Kerry's talking to Iran every day. Logan Act's never charged. Failure to register as foreign lobbyists? Hundreds of people in Washington. Yet the only ones they ever charge are people connected to Trump. Even when they're working with people connected to Hillary, the people connected to the same Russians. People connected to Hillary aren't charged, just people connected to Trump. It's over and over and over. Special treatment for Trump. He gets it as hard as possible. Then juxtapose that to the Hillary investigation. And so it's just garbage. Yeah, and I mean, there is the argument of fruit of the poisonous tree. Milo, you're absolutely right. Yeah, let's take obstruction. This is something I've not heard anyone talk about this but me. But let's take the obstruction angle, right? Because that's all they have left. So there's a point that people make that I agree with fundamentally is, can you really obstruct something if there was no underlying crime? Technically, yes, you can. I get that. But oftentimes it's not charged because the spirit of it, the law, by the letter of the law, you can do it. But the spirit of it is you were trying to stop the fact that you were going to be found guilty of some crime. But I take it, so you hear people say that. I take it a step further, and I haven't heard anyone say this. If we find out as it's becoming more and more apparent, and as I've said, the evidence is suggested, and I, theorized, not just me, by the way, many other people did, for years now, that there was all kinds of wrongdoing going on at the start of the Russia investigation, that basically it was a witch hunt, then could Trump truly have obstructed? In other words, if you're pulled over and the cops plant evidence on you, they throw drugs in the backseat of your car, and then you do all this stuff that's deemed obstruction, like you complain and you do everything you can to smear the cops and say that they're shady and it's crap and this is all witch hunt. Stuff that maybe technically could be considered obstruction. But you were framed in the get-go. Was it really obstruction? I would say no. Now maybe if Trump blatantly did something to obstruct, I don't know, what's an example of something you could do to obstruct an investigation? I know, destroyed subpoenaed emails. Maybe if he'd have did that. Oh, no, that's what Hillary did. That wasn't a crime. My bad. Then even in that world of being framed, you could say, well, yes, but technically that could still be obstruction. But complaining, saying you want... What human being wouldn't want an investigation that sought to frame you to be ended? If you had the authority to end that investigation, wouldn't you say, yes, end it? I'm being framed. My life's being ruined. How can that be obstruction then? And again, I'm sure next week I'll be talking more about the Russia investigation and all the new information that's coming out. Every day, more and more is coming out. That's why the heat in Barr is being turned up. So if it turns out that this was all witch hunt and a sham from the get-go, then, of course, how did Trump obstruct? He didn't commit the crime. It was an unlawful investigation because the FBI and the CIA were doing things they knew were illegal, such as refusing to disclose information to the FISA court, using paid opposition research that they knew were lies. Right, that's a great question. If you stop a cop from trying to plant drugs in your car, is that obstruction? If Trump... And he didn't stop, by the way. It's not even... If you just try to stop but then think better of it. That's what Trump did. Or your friend tells you not to do it. That's a better, metaphor. Of course Trump was pissed. It was a witch hunt. And let's not forget, Trump's reading the same information at the same time, probably much sooner than we are. So he sees that the person in charge of the Hillary and the Trump investigation, Peter Strzok, and saying that he could smell Trump supporters and that he needs an insurance policy to stop Trump from winning. And he knows he's innocent, Trump does. And he sees Strzok saying there's no there. Yet the investigation goes on, yet the media every day saying Russian agent, Russian agent, Russian agent. He knows that his son, Don Jr., is being smeared. People saying he should go to prison for meeting with a Russian and not getting dirt, but potentially getting dirt. Meanwhile, the Democrats and Hillary's team paid to get dirt from Russian officials. He knows that. He could see it. He knows that Hillary's team worked with the Ukrainian government to go after Trump and get dirt on Trump and Manafort in an illegal way. He knows all this. And so he sees it, and he's saying this is a witch hunt. He's saying early, hey, I got wiretapped. We're spied on. My campaign was spied on. No, Trump's a liar. He's a liar. Turns out it was all true. So of course he was fighting tooth and nail. He had the evidence. He knew he was innocent. He saw all the evidence that he was being screwed, and he was arguing against it. He wouldn't have to argue against it if we had a fair press. If the media would have been out there from the get-go, as soon as they found out that the dossier was used to spy on people connected to Trump's campaign, and been like, whoa, are you kidding me? Opposition research paid for by his opponent, using a foreign spy as an intermediary, sourced by Kremlin agents, was used to spy on Trump to see if he worked with Kremlin agents? Again, I'm someone that... I try to be someone who has integrity above party. But part of me, for Schadenfreude reasons, would love to see Trump just come out and be like, we paid a French spy to show us that Joe Biden likes to get peed on by Chinese hookers, and people connected to Biden's campaign actually are Chinese agents. So we're going to wiretap the DNC and Biden's campaign and send spies in. They think it's a constitutional crisis that Barr won't break the law and release unredacted information. That, to the media and to the Dems, is a constitutional crisis. If Trump did what Obama did, there'd be riots in the street. But where was the media? You had a couple voices. Some on Fox. You had Sarah Carter. You had Molly Hemingway, from The Federalist. Guy at the Wall Street Journal. John Solomon at The Hill. Tucker Carlson. Progressives like Jimmy Dore, Aaron Mattei, Glenn Greenwald. That's it. A handful. Other than that, hook, line, and sinker. That's right. The Steele dossier was never verified. They relied, instead of verifying the Steele dossier, they relied on the credibility of Steele himself. But we now know, based on this story that was just released yesterday, that we had people from Obama's administration that interviewed Steele 10 days before his dossier was used for a FISA warrant that came to the conclusion that he had glaring inaccuracies, was clearly lying, and was talking to the press. Therefore, he didn't have credibility. But none of that information was included on the FISA warrant. Again, the threshold for spying on an American and removing their Fourth Amendment protection should be very high. The threshold when that's one president spying on his opponent's campaign should be incredibly high. But instead it was the lowest of thresholds. I remember when the Steele dossier came out, me and other people saying it looked like a third grader wrote it. It was garbage. There was clearly stuff in it that within 5 minutes you could prove was ridiculous. Spelling errors and stuff like that. There was the idea that Cohen was in Prague when his passport clearly showed that was never the case. That lie was repeated 3-4 times. They kept breaking that story. They relied on this guy's credibility that had not. They knew. And then at some point they fired him because he lied to them. Right? He lied to the FBI. So even they had to admit at some point, okay, he's lying to us. He's talking to the press after we told him he couldn't. And he said, no, I'm not. And so they let him go. And they still resubmitted that application using his work 3 more times after that without verifying the information. Still relying on Steele's credibility. Imagine the kind of that. Let's say Don Jr. comes up with some information that says, Cory Booker and Joe Biden are Chinese spies. None of it's verified, but hey, Don Jr.'s a credible guy. Yes, we know that he said that he has every incentive to help his father and keep the Democrats out of office. Just like Steele said he had every incentive to keep Trump out of office. That's the threshold now. That's exactly what the Democrats are saying is okay. That's not a constitutional crisis. That's perfectly fine. Unless Trump does it, and then it'll be the end of the world. By the way, I would be right there with them saying, yes, Trump shouldn't do this. When I said earlier it would be schadenfreude to see him do it. Yeah, you would like to, just so people can get their comeuppance, but I'm more interested in having a just system and actually having people's voices, even if I disagree with those voices, be heard, than having a corrupt system where we could have the president use the most powerful investigative agency in the history of the world as a political weapon to go after their opponent. That is the end of our democracy and the end of all of our voices. If we don't solve this problem, then none of the other issues matter. Maybe you're a Democrat and you're really concerned about global warming. Guess what? Your voice will never be heard. Only candidates that the intel community like will be allowed to be elected. Maybe you're concerned about gun rights like I am. Guess what? Your voice doesn't matter. Only people that agree with the intel community. So you better hope the intel community agrees with you, because those are the only voices that'll matter. All right, I'm rambling a little. Let's see where I had to go next. A little more on this. No. I hit on this a little, but since we're talking about these FISA reports, remember, the exact same people that told us just a year ago when Nunes came out with his memo, they didn't even want Nunes' memo released to the public. They didn't want Grassley's memo released to the public. And if you remember what those memos were about, was exactly what I was just talking about there. The dossier, how it was used to get a FISA warrant against Carter Page. They didn't want that information released. Those redactions were all there, and what was released that was redacted, those redactions were all for good reason. That's what they told us. Then once we started to see what some of the redactions were, such as that the FBI paid $70,000 for a pool table or something. Why was that redacted? Oh, because it embarrassed the FBI. What incentive did Mueller have to redact stuff? Or is the claim that Mueller's redacting stuff that's embarrassing to Mueller? It's embarrassing to Trump. What incentive does he have to not embarrass Trump? The guy that was writing the letter to Barr saying, I'm not happy with the press not attacking Trump enough. That guy? Makes no sense. But those same people that said, no, that Congress doesn't have the authority to see unredacted material like that. Now ask yourself, the FBI, what branch of government's that under? The executive branch. What branch of government is the DOJ under, which is where the Mueller was operating? Also the executive branch, president's branch, right? The argument with Barr not releasing the unredacted information is Congress, the Democrats in Congress are saying, we have oversight authority. We are allowed to see any unredacted material we want. The exact same people here making that argument when we were talking about also the executive branch, the FBI, refusing to release unredacted material. The same people's argument then was, we don't have the right to see that information. For you even suggesting to see that information is harming our country. You're hurting law enforcement. The same damn people. Now, do you see one person on TV making this claim? Do you see anyone? Is there any pushback from all these Democrats or all these media mouthpieces, the Democrat mainstream media? Is there even one person that gets to go on and ask them, like, wait a minute, didn't these people just a year ago say that Congress didn't have the authority to see unredacted information on the FISA application? By the way, which we still haven't seen, neither has Congress. And it's much deeper than that. If you look at places like Judicial Watch and that are always filing Freedom of Information Act requests, the FBI routinely withholds evidence from Congress and oversight committees, even well before Trump. They just do what they please. They say, it would take too long to get to that. Now we're finding out there was a story this week, I can't remember the specific details of it, but some of the documents that the FBI had during the Clinton investigation that they refused to hand over to Congress, now they've said, whoops, we lost them. Sorry, they're lost. Imagine if Barr did that. Imagine if the Trump administration did that. Now you can't receive this material, and then once legally they have to hand the material over. Oh, sorry, we lost it. Riots in the street, constitutional crisis. But when it's the Democrats and their deep state allies doing it, no problem. The Democrats for years have been cheering on the deep state and the intel community, and they have no problem with that. I don't recall them saying, wait a minute, Congress has investigative authority over the FBI. They're the check on the FBI. They should be allowed to see all this material. Why isn't the FBI forced to hand it over? The FBI stonewalled when Republicans were in charge of the House Investigative Committee, House Judiciary Committee. They stonewalled them every single chance they got on every document that they tried to get relating to the start of the Russia investigation, FISA warrants, things like that. And so it's just absolutely asinine. It really is. So yeah, I mean, I wish that I had someone, a liberal on here to, or whatever, a conservative that thinks that this is a constitutional crisis. The label doesn't matter to me. But I wish that one of them were on. Again, am I smarter than the average person? Maybe. I don't think so. I have more time to look into this stuff. But the reason, my recurring theme over and over, almost everything I talk about is just quite simply, I just don't like the double standards. That's it. We write a law, right? The law says you can't, if you're going to lobby for a foreign power, you have to sign special paperwork that shows you're doing that. That's it. I don't care. Republican, Democrat, Green Party, Constitutional Party. I don't care. That's it. That's the law. Okay. People break that law. We enforce that law equally. That's fine. Even if I disagree with the law. If I don't like the law, then I'll try to vote for people that I think would change that law. But I just want the law to be applied equally. That's it. And over and over and over again, we see that it's the exact opposite. Thereby confirming the suspicion I had in the first place for why I voted for Trump was that there is kind of this establishment cabal involving people on both sides, involving unelected officials like intelligence agencies and other wealthy people that really make the decision. And it's one set of rules for them and one set for everyone else. And God forbid someone get in there and then potentially upset the apple cart. Well, we're going to go, Bernie, we'll get him out in the primary. We'll cheat him. Trump, Hillary's our lady. She'll win. We'll do everything we can to smear him. And then once they screwed up, see, the problem is they didn't go aggressively enough because they believed their own BS and thought they had it in the bag. Then once Trump won, it was a shock. Remember, Hillary was like, oh, we'll all hang for nooses. It's a big deal. So they went into overdrive. Call your media friends. That's it. That's exactly what I'm saying. It has nothing to do with intelligent, like, somehow the people that you were smart. I'm lucky. I have a job. I have an interest in this. I have skills that I was a debater and stuff, so I'm able to look at stuff critically. But bigger than that, like Jimmy Dore says this all the time, who, again, is this progressive. You should check out his YouTube channel. Again, let me tell you how much I disagree with Jimmy Dore. Jimmy Dore's probably favorite politician in office right now is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who I could not dislike more, probably. So, we certainly don't agree on everything. But he talks about, he's a stand-up comedian, which I happen to love comedy as well. He says the thing that, and I agree, I think I have the same thing that he's saying he does. It's like a BS detector. You just know, you can see like, dude, you're full of it. That's all it is. It has nothing to do with intelligence. And so it's just real simple. You just want the same treatment. That's it. I know You could bring in the smartest person in the world, the biggest constitutional scholar, an incredible lawyer genius. And they're probably not going to be able to convince me if you just take the names out of it and you just say, here's Group X and here's Group Y. Group X had an investigation into them. They considered firing the investigators but didn't. They said things publicly that was mean towards the investigators. Group Y had an investigation into them. Investigators subpoenaed evidence. They destroyed that subpoenaed evidence. Which group has obstructed justice more? It's that simple. But people twist and turn, and there's confirmation bias. Everyone in the media says that the destroying of subpoenaed evidence wasn't a big deal. Everyone in academia, everyone in the entertainment industry, everyone in Silicon Valley. You know, did you ever see there was this test, a video I saw that's really interesting. And what they do this test where they line like 10 people up. But 9 of them are plants. 9 of them are basically paid by the people doing this study. And there's only one person that's actually the target of the study. And what they do is they'll show them, there's like a scientist that'll stand up and they'll show you a picture and it'll be like of a line. And they'll say, which line is longer, A or B? And B is clearly longer than A. And so at first they all say B, including the one target. Let's say the target's the first person, number 1. But gradually what they do is they keep doing the same thing. And they instruct the 9 plants to all say the wrong answer. And then look at the guy that's the actual target, like with scorn. And eventually, almost every time, you know what happens? The person's willing to lie, the actual target. He'll pick the shorter line. Because that's what the crowds pick. That's what we're seeing. The lie, it goes so far. And you're shamed, you're attacked. You're kicked off Twitter, you're kicked off Facebook. You're called a racist, you're a scumbag, you're a terrible person if you dare to question this stuff. If you don't think that William Barr refusing to break the law and release unredacted grand jury testimony, and you don't think that the people saying that should have at least went in and saw the damn further unredacted version, 2 sentences and 2 footnotes redacted. That's the only thing redacted in the obstruction portion that the Democrats now have access to, and they refuse to look at it. If you have problems with that, well, then you're a scumbag racist, you're a Trump sycophant. You know? It's garbage. I'm sorry, I don't believe it. And the people, good people I know, you know, they're allowing their hatred of Trump to, you know, overwhelm their critical thinking skills. And it really is. It's bigger than Trump. You know? Jill Stein got smeared as a Russian agent. Tulsi Gabbard's getting smeared. Those are progressives. More progressive than Obama. More progressive than Bernie. So if you're a real progressive... And again, I don't agree with these progressive views. Most of them. But if you really... I have friends that are progressives. You know, I have friends from all sorts. I have friends that are communists. I have friends that are socialists. You know, I have a lot of friends that are huge Trump supporters. I have friends that are like conservative Christians that don't like Trump. They think he's immoral, but they're Republicans. You know, I run the gambit. I don't care. We can have completely opposite politics. I'll be friends with you. That's fine. But no matter which of those you're coming from, you shouldn't want these lies to be spread. You should want real journalism. You shouldn't want hyperbolic people on TV screaming this is a constitutional crisis when it's a lie. It's clearly a lie, even if that lie benefits your team. You know, let's look at, and people will say you're a hypocrite. Yes, we're all hypocrites to some extent, but I really try not to be. For example, the economic numbers look really good for Trump, right? But I'm always one to clarify and say, yes, but Trump is spending us more into debt at a faster rate than even Obama did. Now, I had a huge problem when Obama did it, so why wouldn't I have a problem when Trump does it? I didn't like when Obama used executive authority to take unilateral action like DACA. So I didn't want Trump to do it, even though I agree with the border wall. You know, I try my best to be consistent. And I know there's people on the right that, you know, people say, oh, all sides do it. Yeah, I get it. But who has the power? Where is all the cultural institutions of power leaning? They're all like this globalist establishment democratic left, aren't they? It's where the mainstream media is at, 90% of it, 95% of coverage of Trump's negative. It's where the entertainment industry's at, such as Hollywood, TV, the music industry, even athletics. Anytime you hear an athlete speak up, it's politically it's Trump being a bad person. It's where academia is at. 90%. It's getting even further to the extreme left. It's where Silicon Valley's at. These are the powerful voices. This is what they're saying. Yeah, but here was this one, this Republican on this chat room I saw. Yeah, I get it. That guy sucks too. If he's having double standards. But that guy doesn't have real power like the people I'm talking about. And again, this doesn't mean that everybody who votes Democrats like that. I'm not saying that. I personally know Democrats that are like, I don't care about this Russia stuff. I think it's garbage. I talk about them. Jimmy Dore, Glenn Greenwald, Aaron Mattei. There's others like that. I personally have friends that are like that. But we have to start calling this crap out. I mean, it's Orwellian. Blatant falsehoods just repeated over and over and over again. When it's proven to be lies, just total indignation at the people that call out the lies. It's unbelievable. So the last thing I'll talk about, it's not about Barr, unless someone has anything they'd like to add to Barr. And again, I will do my best to try to get on. If you've seen, I need to redo my video that's kind of like why I do this channel. But I still stand by the 3 reasons I do this channel. It was, 1, to show that we could disagree with each other and still be friends and have fun and joke around and be civil. I know I get heated. I'm raising my voice and stuff like that. That's just who I am. If we were talking about the Pittsburgh Pirates, I would be even more heated, trust me. Or any of the sports teams that I'm into or anything like that. But 1, to show that you could disagree and still be friends. I feel that way. 2nd, I wanted to get, and this is something I need to work more on, voices that you don't hear. I live in rural Pennsylvania, and there's a lot of people around here that they don't think they're interested in politics, but they are. And they have a lot of stuff to tell you about, how politics affects them, even if they don't realize it's political. Or, what their philosophy on life is and things like that. Things like people like welders, truck drivers, farmers, When do you ever hear those voices? Yeah, I'm still alive, Pet. So that was the 2nd reason. And the 3rd reason I was doing the channel is I wanted to bring people on that I disagree with and have a platform where I could give them a fair shake and leave people decide on their own. Because I feel like we don't have a lot of stuff like that anymore. People are talking to their own audiences. I want to talk to people that disagree with me. My buddy Drone Tech is a good friend of mine. I do his show every Thursday usually. Usually 4 o'clock I do a live stream on his show. He has way more subscribers than me. But he agrees with me a lot politically. He had a gentleman on yesterday from the UK who's a left-leaning person, That's good. You should talk to people like that, even if you disagree. That's what we should do. So this was an issue particularly I thought I would really like to bring someone on and tell me why Barr's a liar and tell me why this is a constitutional crisis. Because if you turn on your TV, that's all the voices in power, not all, but the vast majority, that's what they're saying. So surely I could find a real person that agrees with that, and they could articulate to me. And the people I see saying this on blogs and places like Above Top Secret or other places, they're saying, it's so obvious. Well, okay, tell me. Well, they can't, but it's obvious. And so I thought, well, I'll bring them on. I'll give them a fair shake, but I couldn't find anyone. So I'm not saying that, I'm not saying, because I'm so smart. No, I'm not saying that. It's an awkward time, 10 on a Friday. I get it. Maybe I'll have better luck some other time. Maybe someone will come on and make me look like a fool. That's fine, but I plan on giving them a fair shake, and that is something I plan on trying to do. So the other thing I wanted to transition to was the other big story this week. For some reason, this was a big story, was the New York Times story about Trump's taxes. I still do not get this tax. I haven't got it ever since it was being talked about. I get it. I know why it's being talked about. But I can't believe that serious people take this seriously. So, for those of you who don't know, the New York Times got access to documents from Trump's taxes from like the late 80s, early 90s, and they basically show that he lost a ton of money, like billions. So there's several things to say about this. 1, who cares? That's obvious. 2, okay, this wasn't news. Trump himself admitted, like on the first season of The Apprentice, he lost a ton of money before. There were tons of tabloid articles about this while it was occurring in the 80s and 90s. 3, if your argument is this shows that it was a tax loophole, yep, Trump admitted in his campaign, I take advantage of tax loopholes. That's how I know that the tax system's screwed up. So I don't get it. The difference is, right, and you might say, well, wait a minute, didn't you make fun of Bernie about his taxes and his charitable contributions? Yes, but the difference is this. If you should always hold yourself to the same standard that you want to hold other people to. That's especially true if you want to compel other people to take action using the force of government, right? So if I say, let's just take an easy example. I'm kind of a big chubby guy. If I'm sitting here eating a big slice of pizza and I'm like, oh, look at that person, they're disgusting. Can you believe, they're eating that greasy pizza? People be like, wait, what? You're eating a slice of greasy pizza. Now, if I'm a big fat guy sitting there going like, hey man, how's that pizza? Then the argument like, wait, what? You're eating a slice of greasy pizza. Yeah, that's okay. I'm not being a hypocrite. You see? If I'm sitting here eating a slice of greasy people's pizza saying, I think the government should force people to not be allowed to eat pizza. While I'm eating it, you'd say, what the heck are you talking about? If you think it's so immoral or so wrong to eat pizza, why are you still eating it until the government forces you to change? That's stupid. If you really believed in it and you thought that it was a moral thing to do, then you wouldn't wait until the government forced you. So Trump's not out there saying, I believe in socialism. I believe that being rich is evil. I believe that we need to tax people at these insane rates. That's what Bernie's saying. That's what the socialists are saying. Yet when you look and you're like, okay, so both Bernie and Trump used tax loopholes. Who cares who used how much? The truth is, Trump's basically being consistent. He's saying, yeah, I don't have a problem with that. Bernie's saying that it's immoral for other people to use these loopholes, but it's okay for him to do it. It's immoral for other people to be rich, but it's okay for him to be rich. That's the double standard. Two people live in a gated community. One says, yeah, you're damn right. I want to keep the criminals out. I'm for the gate. The other says, walls are immoral. Gates are immoral. Anyone should be allowed in. But wait a minute. You live in a gated community. Well, it's different for me. Well, it's the second person that deserves contempt. So I don't understand what this story... Okay, yeah, Trump, who's admitted freely during his campaign that he understands, like, buying off politicians, he's done it. He understands tax loopholes, he's done it. Yep. There were a bunch of stories in the 80s, he lost a bunch of money and took a bunch of tax credits for it. Yep. And now that's somehow news. There is no proof in anything that was released by the New York Times that Trump committed any sort of crime involving taxes. None. Zero. But they can make the insinuation. That's all that matters. We have an entire agency whose job is dedicated to prosecuting people that commit tax criminalities. They haven't charged Trump with anything. Now, could Trump have done something? Possibly. But what's the argument? Well, he needs to be investigated because he could have done something. Okay, I could say the same thing about every American. I accuse Joe Biden of tax problems. I don't just want to see his tax returns, by the way. There could be other shady stuff as well. Why stop at just tax returns? Well, he must be hiding something if he doesn't want them released. Garbage. Does that mean Obama didn't release his long-form birth certificate? It took him forever to release the short-form one. Does that mean he clearly was hiding something? Is that what these Democrats believe? No. That was different. That was his personal information. He didn't have to give it out because some people demanded it. Tough luck. But for some reason, it's different with Trump. Here's maybe what Trump's hiding. What is the tax story been? I've been saying this. What is the implication in the first place? I watched a little bit. I don't watch a lot of mainstream media, but I happened to yesterday, just in the course of doing stuff, catch a little. And so there's this show on Fox called The Five, and there's this, at least they have a token Democrat on there most times. So they had Juan Williams, who's often on there. And, he makes the absurd claim, well, if Trump lost all this money, like, there's a chance that maybe Russian oligarchs back then bailed him out, and so then he's under the thumb of Russians. What are you talking about? That is so... So the Russians gave Trump money in the 80s, and he's been a secret Russian plant. And they were like, yeah, we're going to leave this guy do a successful reality TV show, but that's just going to kind of be the hook. We're going to leave him go on WWE and wrestle Vince McMahon. And then we know he'll be president in 2016. Are you kidding me? Oh, by the way, this is after the Mueller report when we know that's all garbage. But Juan Williams is still going to, well, he could have been under the thumb of Russians. So we're going to investigate anyone who's ever had a loss then? Because theoretically, some criminals in another country could have gave them money. And this is what I've said from the get-go with this tax issue. I ask people, why do you want to see Trump's taxes? What do you think is going to be in there? And inevitably, if they're honest, they'll say something like this. Well, it might show that he had business with Russians. Okay. And? Yeah. He had business with Russians? So, he must be a Russian criminal? What are you talking about? The shocking development would be international businessman has businesses with countries internationally? That's it? So of course, I'm sure Trump had business with Russians. I'm sure he had business with the Chinese. I'm sure he had business with all kinds of crappy, shady characters. And he's smart enough to know that because the media and the journalists aren't real media and journalists, and that they're all out to get him, all the cultural institutions of power are, that when that information comes out, it'll be used to smear him and say, see? Remember like the Rachel Maddow theory? Like I heard Maddow say this one night, like, well, so one day, by Trump's yacht, this guy that was a Russian parked his yacht next to Trump's yacht. So, clearly, Trump's a Russian agent. Or remember when she did this story? At Trump's inauguration, there was a family that was there that were Russian. So what? The law doesn't say he has to release his tax return. They're being leaked over and over, illegally, by the way. Like when Maddow got the last returns, these ones. And even the leaked documents don't show any illegalities. They just show embarrassment for Trump. Probably, Trump, just think, hear this through. This might be shocking. Trump might have bragged and said he was worth more than he actually is. Okay. And he's weird, and that's something that's important to him for whatever reason. And so, he doesn't want that information made public. Okay, it's not a crime. I don't care. What is the potential crime? He broke tax laws. That could be a potential crime. Okay, that's for the IRS to decide. They have access to all that information. You and the public don't need to see that. He had business with foreign people. Okay. Or he didn't make as much money as he claimed he did. Okay, I don't care about any of that. Who cares? And they're saying it. Did you see how smug they are? Look at the clips of them, like Don Lemon and stuff. Who's the biggest loser? Donald Trump. Mr. Lemon, maybe you want to look at the ratings of your own channel before you talk about losers. Maybe you want to look at the fact that there have been several journalistic institutions that have rated you consistently as the worst journalist in the United States. When you talk about losers. This guy that used to be worth $5 billion is only worth $3 billion. He lost $2 billion. Yeah, what a scumbag. Hey, check this out. This guy down the street, right? I know. He used to work at the glass plant that used to be in this little town, Clarion, that I live near, right? And then the glass plant shut down, and now he lost his money in his house. Oh, what a loser, right? Losing money. Oh, man. I know all these people with student loan debt, these kids. Oh, man, yeah. They owe so much money. What a bunch of losers. What are you talking about? This is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Okay, the guy lost money. Sure, there's some schadenfreude. The example's a little different than the local people I'm talking about. And there's some schadenfreude in a guy who takes so much, focus on money and his wealth, not having as much money and wealth as he claimed to have, or having lost some of it. But so, you could say that of anyone in the .com, anyone who got suckered in by Madoff. We can make the same jokes. What the hell does that have to do with governance? How is this a national story? I guess the idea is Trump's not good with money. Okay, fair. That's the argument you want to make. I disagree. He's still a billionaire, but fine. Let's concede that argument. You're right. Trump's terrible with money. And so that would translate as a president that, he would be bad with money. Oh, but the economy's doing fine. So they don't want to focus on how the economy's doing, that it's doing good. Now, again, I have things to say about that. I think that the debt spending's very bad. That's helped lead to that increased economy. But nonetheless, the numbers look good. They don't want to focus on that. They want to focus on Trump's taxes from the 80s, showing that he's lost money. What the hell sense does that even make? That would be like, let's say Joe Biden wins the 2020 election, right? Let's just say he wins. And so then my argument is, yeah, but Joe Biden ran for president twice before and lost, so he's a loser. What a loser. He lost. Yeah, but he won this time. What the hell does it matter that he lost before? It's unbelievable. And this is acted like it's a serious story. Must be behind the same people that said, you're a conspiracy, you're a birther. If you said that Obama was hiding something because he wouldn't release his birth certificate. You're a racist. Those same people are saying, Trump must be hiding something with his taxes. The New York Times run this story. They've lost billions of dollars. Why aren't they shamed? CNN's losing ratings and losing money hand over fist. Most of the mainstream media is. What does that have to do with anything? If CNN puts out a report, let's say, God forbid, CNN break a true story that's negative to Trump, right? Is it a sufficient answer for me to say, yeah, but they've lost viewers, so I'm not going to look at that story? No, people would be like, what the hell does that have to do with anything? Did you read the story? The story's true. It's backed up by facts. What does CNN's viewership have anything to do with that? In the same token, what does the fact that Trump may have lost money in the 80s, something that we knew, have to do anything with today's governance? At all. Nothing. And then the last thing is, well, since we're focused on politicians' money, I'm less concerned about the ones that lost money, actually. What I would like to see a focus on, if we had real journalists, is how do we get people like Pelosi and Feinstein and Schumer, and they're Republicans the same way, right? Republicans and Democrats that, you know, are of somewhat meager means entering politics, and they're getting paid like $170,000 a year. Yet after like 6-7 years, they went from $170,000 a year to maybe having $500,000 net worth when they entered to now being worth $35 million. How did that happen? Where did they get all this money? That I would be more interested in, even with Trump, whatever. With the Clintons, with the Obamas, with the Bushes. I don't care. The letter beside their name doesn't mean anything to me. That's a real story. Oh, wait a minute. We have these politicians that are getting incredibly wealthy and we don't know where the money's coming from. And it also seems that they oftentimes don't give two hoots about their constituents. Could it be possibly that if you're getting a bunch of money from unknown sources that maybe you're more interested in who's giving you that money than the people your average constituents? That seems to be a more legitimate story. Hell, we had a great example of that in the Clinton Foundation. The Clintons. All the shady sources, they're getting money. The accusations of pay for play. Media didn't want to touch that. If only Hillary would have lost money in the 80s, that would have been a relevant story, I guess. So yeah, this tax story makes no sense to me. And here's another thing to say about it. One of the things, you know, screw Mitt Romney, by the way, because I heard Romney say this, and I heard other Republicans, but certainly a litany of Democrats say this. The Mueller report showed that although there was no conspiring with Trump people and the Russians, Trump's people were more than happy to use the material that the Russians released. And Romney said that disgusted him. And people say, well, that should disgust every American. In other words, Trump was more than happy to use illegally obtained material from a foe. To which I said, yeah, that's exactly how politics works. I'm sorry. If Trump's team didn't do anything illegal to obtain that material or suggest that the Russians do it, which is what the Mueller report suggests, then okay, there's no harm, no foul. Every single negative... Okay, I won't say that. The majority of negative stories that you hear come from people, a lot of time had something criminal, like a criminal leak or something that went into it. And I said, for example, the Democrats had no problem using Russia propaganda. Neither did the FBI, neither did the media when it came to the Kremlin agents that sourced the dossier. Had no problem with that, right? None whatsoever. And here's another one. Did anyone, and I said this would happen. Remember, this is what I said in a video like 2 weeks ago. I said, remember when Rachel Maddow got a hold of Trump's tax returns? That was illegal. Someone illegally, they did not have the right to obtain Trump's tax returns and to give them to the public. But they did. Were people appalled and ashamed that the Democrats and the media would use that illegally obtained material to go after Trump? No, they didn't even bat an eye, because that's the way politics works. Yes, I know that there was this movement, like remember Cuomo and all these people at CNN and other places, they told you can't look at the WikiLeaks material. It's illegal for you to look at the WikiLeaks material. Yes, I know they tried to downplay it and say, we're not going to look at what the material says because we don't like who supposedly released it. But that's not how they do anything else. No one's saying, I didn't see Cuomo say, whoa, we're not going to talk about Trump's taxes because he didn't release them themselves and someone broke some sort of law to release it. Whoa, we're not going to talk about leaks from the intel community because those are illegal leaks. And it would be ridiculous if the Democrats talk about those leaks to their advantage because now they're cheering for illegal leaks from the intel community. How's that any different? You're telling me right now, and this tax return story proves it, but to further that, if China tomorrow released a bunch of documents saying, hey, we obtained access from all these documents, Trump emails that show that Trump's like this criminal, he's done all this disgusting stuff, do you think that the press would be like, well, in the Democrat, hey, we're not going to use that. The Chinese is our enemies and they got this information. No, we won't do that. Now, remember when Trump told this joke, and because Hillary made this asinine comment, hey, I'm Hillary Clinton. Hey, I just want to say to Congress that subpoenaed all this evidence that I deleted. I'm sorry. It's no big deal. It was all yoga anyways, so no big deal. And Trump's like joking, he's like, oh, so apparently our FBI, he knew back then. Apparently our FBI is not going to be able to find this evidence. Maybe Russia could find it. If you find Hillary's yoga emails. By the way, that's not what Russia released or hacked. That was the DNC and the Podesta emails. Hack's a loose word. Supposedly a phishing attempt because Podesta's password was password. Anywho. Right? That joke. And then they said that to this day. It was in the Mueller report. Like, even the Mueller report took that joke. President Trump asked for assistance from the Russians. The Democrats, Trump basically told the Russians to hack. Remember all that? Remember that crap? Well, then fast forward to, we had all sorts of wealthy people saying they would pay money for Trump's tax returns. Would people at the New York Times say that? We had Hillary Clinton just last week, obviously joke, saying, well, maybe China should hack and get Trump's tax returns. Oh, lo and behold, a week later, tax information comes out. Now, what do I think about that? I think, so what? That's what I think. If they find out who illegally obtained those tax returns, charge them. Other than that, I don't blame the media for... it's a non-story to me, but fine. I don't think it's criminal or unethical for the media to talk about the story because it was obtained illegally. I don't think Hillary should be charged or investigated for her comments. But the Democrats and the media all thought that because Trump told that joke, that warranted all the scrutiny, and they took that joke seriously. They refused to have a sense of humor about it. It was serious. Well, now that we know that the people at the New York Times said they'd pay for Trump's tax returns, and now that we know that Hillary suggested that China should hack them, and then a week later, more tax information from Trump gets released, call the special counsel, right? Isn't that what the Democrats should be cheering for? Let's raid Hillary's office in the middle of the night. Let's raid the New York Times offices, right? Isn't that what they should be cheering for? Shouldn't the people at the New York Times be given the same treatment that Julian Assange is being given? When WikiLeaks broke this material, that was terrible. Bad WikiLeaks. They must be agents of Russia. Well, if the New York Times broke it after Hillary suggested China hack Trump and get these tax returns, then I guess the New York Times should be under suspicion of being Chinese, right? Working for the Chinese. Makes sense, right? According to them. But no, more double standards. That's kind of all I had on that, unless someone had any specific questions. The DNC. Well, right. And never forget, Milo, right? Never forget. The DNC refused to allow the FBI to look at the physical server. Period. So on one side of their mouth, they're telling us this is an attack. This is World War III. We need to have actual physical responses to the Russians. They stole the election. This is one of the biggest attacks on our democracy ever. And on the other side of their mouth, they're saying, but it's not important enough that we allow the FBI to look at the most important piece of physical evidence. The FBI is telling us it's a huge deal. It warranted all these investigations into Trump, warranted sending spies, warranted wiretaps, warranted 2 years of investigations. But it didn't warrant them actually saying, sorry, Democrats, it's out of your control. We're coming to look at the physical server. Those two groups have spent 2 years now telling us how important this was, but they couldn't be bothered to come together so that the biggest piece of physical evidence could be looked at. Instead, it had to go through a third-party, CrowdStrike, that was being paid by Hillary's team. A group that, by the way, their very next investigation was into a Ukrainian hack. And they said, yeah, the Russians did it. And the Ukrainian government came out and said, yeah, that's not true. We proved that you're wrong. But trust them this time. Trust them in this situation. Why? Give me one. I've yet to find any reason. Give me one good reason the Democrats wouldn't allow the FBI to look at their servers. Just one. There's only two possible explanations. One, they're lying about the hack and they knew it. And they wanted to control the narrative by having the only people that had physical access to be the company they were paying for. Or two, there was other damaging information on that server that they didn't want the FBI to see. So maybe they were legitimately hacked, but not all the information on the server was hacked, and there was other damaging evidence of crimes or just embarrassing stuff that was on there, and they didn't want the FBI to see. But number two is not going to help the situation anymore, because what you're told by people say this, and I admit to being a layman technologically, right? I don't understand, is a physical copy of material on a server as good as access to the physical server itself? I've had people tell me yes and no. I would lean towards no. And the reason is, again, I can't think of any two arguments other than that I just gave. One, there was no hack, and so that's why the Democrats didn't want the FBI to look at the server. Instead, they wanted the agency they were paying. Or two, there was other embarrassing stuff there, so they didn't want the FBI to find that, so they just sent a copy. But if number two is true, then that copy, if it's a perfect copy of the server, would still contain all of that embarrassing information that the FBI would then look at. Do you understand that? So let's assume, right, we'll take number one out of the equation. Why wouldn't the Democrats allow the FBI to look at the server? Okay. We're going to say they were hacked. We'll say they were, for the sake of argument, they were legitimately hacked. Okay. I can't think of any reason, none, other than there's embarrassing crap on there that didn't have to do with the hack they didn't want the FBI to see. I mean, if I really stretch, it could be, well, because they didn't trust the FBI? Or they thought the FBI would have their servers for too long? But both of those arguments are garbage in a world where we're talking about this is they're clamoring for the FBI to do something. They trust the FBI when it comes to investigating Trump and when letting Hillary off the hook. And who cares the time it would take if this is the most serious attack on our country, etc. So those don't cut the mustard either. That's super weak. So the best explanation is there was crap on that server. Yes, it got it, and we're assuming it was hacked. So, okay, it was hacked, but there was crap on that server they didn't want the FBI to see. So instead they made a copy of the server and then gave it to the FBI. And number one, like I think you're saying, Pat, how do you know if a copy's accurate if you can't see the original? You know, my sister draws a picture of a house. I trace it and copy it, and I hand you the copy, and I say, that's an actual direct copy, identical to the original. How do you know if that's true unless you see the original? And second, if it actually is a direct copy, then wouldn't all that embarrassing crap that they didn't want the FBI to see on their server still show up on the copy? So if that's true, if number two is true, okay, there was other embarrassing crap they didn't want the FBI to see, so they sent a copy. That proves that the copy they sent wasn't a direct copy because it would have eliminated that embarrassing crap they didn't want the FBI to see. Which means that the FBI did not have the fullest access to the most and only piece of physical evidence. And what is being called by the Democrats and the FBI the biggest attack on our democracy. To me, I would argue that number one seems more likely. That it wasn't hacked, at least in the manner that we were told. Here's a possibility. Is it the chance that it was hacked? Maybe not just by the Russians. Maybe it was hacked by multiple groups, right? And maybe it wasn't just hacked. Maybe it was hacked by the Russians and the Chinese and the French and the German. And maybe someone inside the DNC also leaked the information. Could it be true that Russia used, what was it, Fancy Bear and Cozy Bear, whatever their hacking procedures and groups were? But at the same time, someone also downloaded that information and took it to WikiLeaks? Why wasn't Mueller interviewing Assange? He's the one. Why not? Why didn't Mueller interview VIPs, which is the Veteran Intelligence people, Bill Binney, and people like that said that people that worked for decades in the intelligence community that said that all of their looking at this seemed as if it wasn't a hack. It was actually a download. That someone inside got the information and released it. Now, that doesn't mean Bill Binney's right. That doesn't mean that it wasn't a hack. But aren't you interested in collecting all the relevant information if this case is so crucial and so important? Wouldn't you want to get the physical evidence? And Comey's testified. I've had this argument. Comey testified. It is FBI procedure to get the physical server. That's what they wanted. That's what they asked for. But because the Democrats said, no, you can't have access to it, they went with the next best thing. Well, I'm sorry. If we're talking about a matter of national security, then the Democrats don't get to say you don't get to look at the evidence. Because it's no longer just their personal possession. If I get hacked personally, and I come out and I say, yeah, some of the material on my computer is going to be used by Russia that they hacked, that, they're going to be able to create a lot of havoc in this country from it. And that's credible that that's true. In the case of the Democrats, that would be credible because they're a national party. And then the FBI is like, okay, we're coming to look at your computer. And I'm like, nah. They would say, guess what, pal? It's out of your hands at this point. It's a matter of national security. But not with the Democrats. For some reason, the FBI backed down with the Democrats. Isn't that weird how that happens over and over? Excuse me, Democrats, Hillary, you're running for president. We'd like to see some more evidence. We'd like to see these more emails, so we're going to send a subpoena. Okay. Next day. Hey, yeah, that material you're subpoena, yeah, we went ahead and deleted it. So, and the FBI's like, oh, cool, no problem. Remember, anything you do choose to give to us, we'll smash with hammers afterwards, so there's no chance of you ever getting in trouble. We've already given everyone immunity, so no big deal. That sound like a realistic investigative agency? Hey, can we... Oh my God, we've been attacked by a foreign power. It's going to lead to all kinds of damage to our democracy. Can we see the evidence of that? No, sorry, you can't see the evidence. Oh, okay, sorry we asked. Please, if you get around to sending us a copy, we'd really appreciate it. It's ridiculous. It doesn't pass the smell test. And everybody knows it. Switch the name Democrat to Republican, and the media would be on this 24/7. Yeah, with Debbie Wasserman Schultz. I mean, the whole Awan brother situation is absurd. They have this guy dead to rights. Debbie Wasserman Schultz is doing everything she can to make sure that the federal government and investigators don't get access to the laptops he has that proves that he was basically keeping all sorts of classified material and blackmail material on other members of Congress. They're sending more money than you're allowed to legally while they're skipping the country. And they get a slap on the wrist. Debbie Wasserman Schultz is threatening police officers over it. Was that obstruction? Oh, no mention of that. Nothing. Actual espionage. Actual spies. People that were actually interested in harming our country and politicians representing it. Getting physical evidence and allowed to walk scot-free. But don't be a Russian troll using Pokemon Go ads. Oh, man. We'll throw the hammer at you then. I mean, it's so stupid. Alan Dershowitz talks about this all the time. He calls it the shoe on the other foot test. Switch the names. Switch Republican and Democrat and talk about any of these stories. Donald Trump destroys subpoenaed evidence. What do you think the media treats that as? Republican staffer, Trump's and his allies are fighting tooth and nail to make sure that, this person from a foreign country that has all this illegal material on his computer and made all this money shadily, no one gets access, and they're, basically threatening the local police. What do you think the media story on that is? No big deal like it was with Debbie Wasserman Schultz? Of course not. That's all I'm asking. Enough of the double standards. Yes, we all have biases. I have biases, right? Everyone watching this does. How can we trust our journalists or our intel agencies, or they're supposed to operate despite those biases? And yet every time their biases are worse, the media and the intel agencies and the politicians. Every single time. You know, and I have friends. One of the things that's so frustrating to me on Facebook, you know, I met a lot of people like through debate. A lot of my Facebook friends, there's some that are like huge Trump supporters and some that just despise Trump. And it's everything. The only thing I ever put in Facebook's like, hey, I got a live stream coming up. That's it. But it's everything I have to not just go to some of these people. Like, you know, for me, it was big in the Covington situation. It was the only thing I kind of politically said in Facebook other than my videos where I was like, hey, I saw a lot of my feed and all you people saying how racist scumbags these kids were. Now that the truth's come out, can you at least, you know, publicly put, hey, by the way, I was wrong? Nope, can't do it. I saw a lot of people for 2 years saying Russia collusion. Can you go on and say, hey, I was wrong? Nope, can't do it. And it worries me because I'm seeing now people in my real life that I know are good, decent people, smart people. We might disagree politically, but who cares? People I would say had integrity. They can't do it. They bought into the line. They can't get out of the line. You know, had I seen evidence, clear-cut evidence, I was able to see that Trump was actually conspiring with Russians. I said from the get-go, that's fine. If he broke the law, charge him. Fine. I didn't see any proof of it. But I'm willing to see it. But I don't know how. Like, we're starting to see the insanity you see on Twitter. And I know this is anecdotal, but you see it on Twitter, or you see it in the mainstream media, or, you know, whatever. Of just the further division. I do think it's magnified on Twitter. It's magnified in the mainstream media. But you're starting to see it infiltrate people I know in real life. You know, I think that you're starting to see, you know, family members and stuff, like people that legitimately, you know, you can't say you support Trump. Or it could be the opposite. If you're in a family that's all Trump supporters and you don't support him, you know, there's a wedge being driven. And it's just, all I'm asking is, you know, and I'm with you, Pat. I mean, we still have biases, Pat, even if we think we don't. It doesn't have to be a party affiliation. It could be an ideological affiliation or whatever. But we all bring our own baggage into anything we learn and anything we talk about. And the important thing is to try to do your best to hear people from other perspectives and, you know, to not deny reality and not spin things in the, you know, to constantly fit your narrative. I mean, the Covington situation was an exact, it was just, it's, there. That's this type of situation where the facts are so blatant and the reactions of people are so antithetical to the facts that it's shocking to you. It's just, I know people, like, here's something with the Covington story. This just blew my mind. Look at it in perspective what happened. Story comes out. Kid's got a punchable face. The narrative spun. You only see a little bit of the clip. All these evil, white, wealthy kids, you know, surrounding this Native American and treating him like crap, and he was just beating a peace drum, etc., right? That was the original story. Then the full video comes out. Okay, turns out that story was garbage. In fact, it was the opposite, basically. Black racists yelled at these kids the whole time. Kids basically, you know, some of them were immature and they chanted back or whatever, but I didn't hear any racial chants, anything like that. Then the Native Americans stood up for the black racist. The kids didn't surround him. He walked into the group of the kids. The Native American's ally, the other Native American that was with him, is yelling racial taunts at the kids, saying they should go back to Europe and things like that. The kid in question, Nick Sandman, that everyone's saying is terrible, tells his friend to stop responding to that and stands there with a nervous smirk. That was the truth of the situation. Now, we now know that after that, oh my God, these kids were getting doxxed, they're getting death threats, potential schools they were trying to go to were getting mass emails, and not just by random people, blue checkmark people on Twitter, media people, entertainment industry people, death threats to the point that were at least taken seriously enough where the school had to shut down for a few days. These kids' lives potentially ruined. Now, stop, full stop, that's where we're at. You can see the full video yourself. You can see that the media spin and everything on it was crap. You can see that there were serious consequences, that the school got shut down, that there were death threats being issued, right? The media at this point, including, not just the media, but including people that I consider intelligent and people that were my friends, did something that was so heinous that I could not believe it. And the media, whatever, you expect it, but my friends, like, I couldn't believe it. They started to do things like this. Well, yeah, but 6 years ago, there was a basketball game where this kid at that school painted himself in all black. So, what the hell does that have to do with anything? These kids are getting death threats, and you're looking for justification for why they should be getting these death threats. 6 years ago, every single kid that's on that, you know how many grades are in high school, right? 6 years ago, those kids weren't even at that school. You're making like people that I thought were smart people that weren't like crappy people that like, and you're just like, all the other stuff aside, decide that they're kind of defending black races, that this Native American was defending this black race, all that stuff, like we could debate, and I think it's all horrible and stuff, but this particular issue, it just blew my mind. What hope do we have when people that I consider intelligent, good people, and I'm watching them, and you'll say, like, I'm like, oh my God, do you realize what you're doing? Or they'd be like, here's a 10-second clip of these kids yelling MAGA. But wait a minute, how do you know it's even kids from the same school? And so what? They yelled MAGA. We're talking about these kids' lives being destroyed. For what? Now it's excused because they yell MAGA? It wasn't the whole point of this situation that people took one 5-second clip and then spread this narrative around it and it turned out to be a lie? And so now you're defending it by taking another 5-second clip and spreading a narrative? How can this be? And I still have no answers. I just, yeah, I mean, the Kavanaugh was the other situation. Those are the two stories to me. More than anything, and this Russia story is going to be the third story. But I've been saying the Russia story is the biggest political scandal in the history of the country, at least in my lifetime. It's exponentially bigger than Watergate. Instead of a couple bumbling fools spying on an opponent, we had the most powerful intelligence apparatus in the history of the world being used to spy. But with this Covington kid story, and people made fun of me. They're like, why do you keep talking about it? It's over with. No, it's not. It's indicative of our media, and it's indicative of how even good people could get caught up in this lie of this narrative. And then what came right after it? The Smollett story. Did the media learn? And that's what people say. Well, maybe this will be a watershed moment where the media will learn. Boop. Fast forward to the Smollett story. Same damn thing. Except this time, at least there weren't innocent white kids. What we learned from the Covington story is that identity politics are so strong and so persuasive. I would say things like, I'm not going to say, but like on this website I'm on, Above Top Secret, there was one person who leans left-wing and I leaned right-wing, who I think is very intelligent and I enjoy. He's sometimes proved to be right over me in certain issues. And even if I think I'm right, I enjoy my conversations with this person and find them to be reasonable and intelligent. They were one of the ones that were like, yeah, but what about this basketball story? And I'm just like, what are you talking about? How are you continuing to smear these kids? You know? And when you saw that, you were just like, I don't know. If that who is one of the people I would consider the least likely to do that are jumping in both feet, what chance do we have? But they were saying, well, this could be a watershed moment. The media won't do this stuff anymore. And I said, are you kidding me? They're doing it right now still with the Covington kids. They're saying, yeah, but. Remember, then the next story came out. Well, actually, at the Covington High School, there was a gay valedictorian that they didn't allow to give a speech because he was gay. So, how is that relevant to black adult racists yelling at these kids, and then a Native American sticking up for the black adult racists, and then the media smearing these kids, and the entertainment industry, and all these people saying they should be put in wood chippers, they have punchable faces, and then them getting death threats, and that story being 100% wrong. It was actually the exact opposite of that. And so instead of saying, holy crap, we made a huge mistake, you say, yeah, but, that school's bad. And then every time they said that, yeah, but they were wrong again. So with the story with the valedictorian, it was, well, actually, it wasn't Covington. It was another, Catholic school in the area. And actually, it wasn't that he wasn't allowed to give the speech because he was gay. It was because he didn't submit it in time, and it was over length and things like that. And actually, it turned out it wasn't that kid was wearing blackface at the basketball game. It was that it was a blackout night, and he painted himself black. You know, how do you, and you keep going. Imagine, put the shoe on the other foot, right? Let's go with that test again. So the Covington situation. Let's say we have a bunch of black kids at Washington, D.C. from a black school, inner city or private, doesn't matter. Black kids sitting around in a group. They're kind of rowdy, having fun, so what? And a bunch of neo-Nazi types surround them and start making black racial slurs and homophobic slurs at them. And then there's a gentleman, Native American, whatever, it doesn't matter. He's watching the whole incident go down. Okay, we got the neo-Nazis yelling at these black kids. And he says to himself, There's a lot of harsh things that are being said by these neo-Nazis. But there's some harsh truths, too, that these black kids are sheltered from that they don't get to hear. And it makes these black kids uncomfortable. And I was worried those black kids were going to get upset at those neo-Nazis. So I stood in solidarity with those neo-Nazis. Imagine that, right? Okay? How's that story going to fly? But then, even further, once it turns out that the media got the story wrong, which they never would have, but if the media then would have came out and been like, oh, these black kids, they looked aggressive. That older gentleman, they surrounded this older gentleman, right? Once that's turned out to be proven wrong, then imagine people start saying things like this. Actually, though, we went back and looked at that black high school that these kids are from, and there's tons of crap. There are tons of crimes and stuff committed at this black high school. So those black kids kind of had it coming because all the criminality that occurs at the school, which oftentimes you could say, because tragically, a lot of these inner city schools, there are a lot of bad things coming. Does that mean that some bad action that happens to a black student that did nothing wrong, that was approached by racists, should then be judged by criminal or shady behavior that occurred 6 years by the time he got there to that school? No! People would say, my God, you're a racist, and they would be right. So what? You're somehow saying it was okay that this black kid was unfairly smeared and attacked by racists? Because he comes from a community or he goes to a school that something crappy happened 6 years before he was there? It's just, it's, and these were normal people. These are rational people. Maybe it'll change. Maybe the media learned their lesson. They didn't learn their lesson. What line needs to be crossed further? Where's the next line? If we defend black adult racists over white kids, what's the next line? Infants? Black Panther or black, what are they called? The Black Hebrew Israelites, homophobes, misogynists, racist, violent, have people in their organization killed people, beheaded people in Florida, connected to at least 14 murders. If that group's to be defended over white kids because these kids are white, or because they might like Trump, where have we got to go? And they tell you with a straight face, like, nah, that's not what the media and the Democratic Party's about. It's not about that. Cultural Marxism. That's what I was saying. This person from Above Top Secret, they tell me with a straight face for years. Oh, dude, you need to stop with this cultural Marxism crap. With this idea, it's a myth. That doesn't occur. That's not happening in the Democratic Party. Okay. Explain it to me then, how this happened. It's just, I mean, then you go, like, and the Kavanaugh thing was before that. I couldn't believe it. You know, and we talk about, and it's one of the things that, when I was in debate, you would hear this a lot. They try to change definitions, right? So they would say things like, actually, black people can't be racist. Because the definition that they would use of racism is like, you have to have institutional power in order to be racist. And so, if you're a homeless black guy and you don't like white people, well, that's not racism because there's nothing you could do to affect it. But it's like, well, yeah, there is things you could do to affect. One, that's what you could do to affect has no part of the idea of racism. That's just you acting in terrible ways based on your ideological belief. But you have this ideological belief that still could be racist. I could be, bedridden with no power, no money, in a nursing home and still be racist, still say terrible things to the black nurse that comes in to take care of me, right? That's still racism. I have no power. A black person, even if they don't have power, could be racist. It's just you're judging people based on their skin color or ethnicity in negative ways. That's racism. But they would make this argument, right? You have to have institutional power. Even if you don't have institutional power and you still think, well, you can only be racist if you act on it. So what? You could be an individual black person or Hispanic or white or Asian or whatever and beat someone with a pipe because you don't like their skin color. It doesn't matter if you have institutional power, or you could say harmful things that hurt them. Institutional power doesn't matter. But they would make this argument of institutional power, which is garbage. But there is some truth in that and it is a good thing to defend people that are on the butt end of, that maybe don't have as much power. There's something like I do, that like I cheer for the underdog. It's something that I do, It's why I get disgusted, I happen to work in the mental health field. I get physically enraged when I see people like treating people with mental health conditions in terrible ways, or like homeless people or things like that, because you feel like, not that the mental health means they're always great people or homeless means you're always great people. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, pick on someone your own size, basically, Don't, someone that life's got them down for various reasons to kick them, that it's garbage. It angers me. So I get that. That, I don't have to say anymore. I think everyone understands what I'm saying here, right? But that's how I feel. So I do get where they're coming from, but that doesn't mean you can't be racist without that institutional power. But what I say now is, like, what is the institutional power of the neo-Nazis, of the KKK? What's their power? Does anyone in our country take them seriously? Are there politicians? I know people say, well, Trump's a racist, Trump's like, whatever, garbage. And everybody knows that's garbage. What's the pull that these groups have? Are there academic courses? The problems with black people, the problems with brown people? They're misogynist courses, the problems with women? Do we have politicians? Do we have separate racial groups, for white racial supremacy? Do we have groups calling for white people to get money just because of their skin color? Do we have groups calling for, looking at historical abuses against white people? Do we have any of that? No. But we do for the other races, don't we? Now, am I saying that those races shouldn't be allowed to do that? No, I'm not saying that. But if we're going to take that definition of institutional power, what the hell is the institute? What they'll say is, well, there's more white politicians. There's more white professors. So what? The ideology that they're pushing isn't based on white supremacy. It is perfectly acceptable in academia to say white people are evil, men are evil, straight people are bad, Christians are bad. Perfectly acceptable. If you tried to say the reverse, you would be drummed out so fast, you wouldn't know what hit you. It is perfectly acceptable. Now, in our media, to say that black racist adults, whatever, we all just laugh them off, no big deal. That them attacking white kids, it's fine. But wearing a hat that says Trump is racist. Where's the institutional power lie? That's why it's important to talk about this stuff. Yes, you could go into any bar in any town. I can go into like an inner city black neighborhood and I probably hear some bigoted things against white people. Yes, you can go to a rural white bar and hear some racist things against black people or homophobic things. Yes, there are terrible individuals out there. But the prevailing thought, the people that are in power are institutions. The things that shape public perception. What are they saying? And all these cultural institutions of power are dominated by the establishment left, like the globalist Democratic Party. And so that's why it's important to rail against this stuff. And I go back to this. Johnny Rotten, I really enjoyed punk music. Johnny Rotten was with the Sex Pistols. He came out and he said the only way to be punk at this point is to support Trump. Because being punk was being anti-establishment. Where's the establishment? The establishment's all anti-Trump. And I guess there's some of that in me, some of this contrarian. So, I don't know. But, yeah, and the Covington and the Kavanaugh story, they're still worth talking about to this day. Because they've never been resolved. No one apologized. No one changed their tune. And the double standards are incredible. I mean, look at the Kavanaugh situation. Again, that's what I'm saying. Like, we could sit here, we could wax philosophical. We could talk, about what we would like to see specifically with this, that, and the other, what the specific letter of the law is, things like that. But for me, it just comes down to really simple. Yes, it's worth having these philosophical discussions, but where we need to start is basically being consistent, not having double standards. Yeah, globalism is what it's all about. That's all I'm saying. Let's just don't have double standards. I respect someone more. Like, for example, a progressive. Let's say you're a communist, progressive, you're for reparations, I still respect you more if you're honest about it and if you don't have double standards about it. Even if I disagree with you, it's like, well, hey, at least you're honest and you're consistent. I don't think that trying to get dirt on your opponent from a foreign source is a big deal. It's maybe a little shady. But it's not a crime. I don't think it was a crime when Hillary's team did it. I don't think it's a crime when Don Jr. tried to do it. That's me being consistent. If you think it's a crime when Don Jr. did it, and you say, yes, and it was also a crime when Hillary did it, I disagree with you, but at least you're consistent. That's something I could work with. If you say that Don Jr. committed a crime, but Hillary Clinton didn't, then you're partisan. You're biased. Yeah, I mean, with the homeless, oftentimes there's a lot going on. And yeah, politically, how do you trust? I mean, you're absolutely right. But you don't kick those people when they're down, is all I'm saying. And I'm sure you agree with that as well. It's working in the mental health industry, it's very, one of the hardest things. You learn not to judge people based on their diagnosis and things like that. So you don't look at someone and say, that person has autism, so then they're X, Y, and Z. Because that person's still an individual, right? And oftentimes we do that in negative ways. But there's also a danger of doing it in positive ways. And I think this is something that the cultural Marxists make a mistake if you stretch it out to other groups. Is where you say, I could look at a person and say, this person has autism, so they'll never be able to do X because of their diagnosis. Well, that's not really fair, right? I should learn them as an individual because each individual is different. That would be a negative reaction based on a stereotype or their diagnosis. A positive reaction could be like, this person has autism, so they could do no wrong. They shouldn't be held accountable for any of their actions. Absurd. That's just as bad in the opposite way. And this is what we see with cultural Marxism in general. So you label groups as oppressors or oppressed. White people are oppressors. Minorities are oppressed. Blacks are oppressed, right? And so then you say, well, it's not their fault. The blacks need help. They've been kept down or whatever. That's still racism to me. That's a bigotry of low expectations. That's judging, and it's not just blacks. You could say women or gays or whatever. I choose to believe that black people are every bit as capable as me, as are gay people, as are women, as are transgender. I might not agree politically with some of the transgender, but I'm not. If someone comes out to me as transgender, I don't care. We could argue about whether they should be in sports and stuff like that. We could argue whether I think that it's a mental illness or something like that. But I'm not going to treat someone bad because they have, bipolar. I'm not going to just treat them like crap, and I'm not going to do it just because they're transgender. You learn that people are more than just those superficial things, so you judge them for who they are as people. I feel the same way with the homeless. Like, it came up because we're talking about the homeless. I feel the same way about the homeless. Yes, in general, if you take a general look, a lot of homeless people are homeless for a reason. It could be mental health, it could be substance abuse and things like that. But you don't attack people because of that condition, and you don't celebrate people because of that condition either. That's all I'm saying with that. So I guess the last thing I'll talk about real quick is just this shooting in Colorado. Which, first it goes without saying it's terrible. And that kid that intervened, for those of you who don't know, it was called the STEM school. And I believe the shooters had handguns. And, this kid, with unarmed, runs up and basically saved lives by tackling this guy. But he died. And, it's tragic. And that kid's a hero. I oftentimes, if you see on, if I'm on somewhere like Above Top Secret or other places, I don't really chime in on a lot of the shooting type stuff, because I just don't have much to say. You always end up politicizing some sort of tragedy, so maybe I'll wait a little or something like that, but whatever. But what I wanted to say here is, they had a vigil, and a bunch of politicians and activists came and started preaching gun control. And some of the kids got upset and walked out, and they were chanting mental health, because that's basically what they think was the cause of this. And then they came back in and they were like, look, we don't want to be politicized. Yeah. I mean, they're absolutely right. It's terrible. I'm sick and tired of stuff like this being politicized. What law, if it was a handgun, what law possibly would have been instituted that would solve this, And it's fine. We can have the political discussion. That's fine. But at a vigil? What should have been talked about at that vigil? That hero. That's it. Whether you're totally for the Second Amendment or you want to see it completely repealed and don't think anyone should have a gun. That moment was to talk about that kid being a hero. That's it. Oh, yeah. I don't know. I'm taking the story at face value that this kid was a hero. But anyways, that's what the vigil should have been about. And the fact that people, and they think, and here's what gets me about this is people that do that, those gun activists that came, they feel morally justified in that. I'm going to turn this vigil into advocacy for my side. They feel totally morally justified. And it's just wrong. It couldn't be more wrong. And yes, the right does this too, and I've called them out, right? Like, you know, when an illegal immigrant kills someone, and then immediately the story's like, well, you know, build the wall or something. It's like, I don't know. It just seems shady to me. It's worth talking about the numbers as a whole. It's worth using anecdotal evidence, but for me, it seems like these are just appeals to emotion, and oftentimes when we have these direct appeals to emotion, that we forget kind of the bigger arching story. You know, I think the Democrats do this more, but I admit to being biased, and I understand the Republicans do it as well. And I'll get to, you know, that in a second, but, you know, I said, the only comment I made in this on any thread was like, look, I don't think, because it turns out, I guess this shooter was, you know, someone who was an Obama supporter who, like, put up videos of Seth Meyer. Now, is it worth pointing this out? Yes, it is in a sense, because the hypocrites on the other side, the hypocrites on the left will say, like, oh, this person was a Trump supporter, and they somehow use that to smear, like, the idea of supporting Trump. Hell, even when they're not a Trump supporter, even when you have some white supremacist that says, I hate Trump, I think he's a Jew sympathizer, they still say, oh, Trump, it's somehow Trump's fault. So it is worth pointing out the double standard, like, okay, if that's how it's going to be, then you have to say that Seth Meyers and Obama is partially responsible for this person. Or we could take the sensible approach and say, neither is true. You know, this person doesn't represent Obama supporters. Some crazy person that goes out and shoots people that like Trump doesn't represent all Trump supporters. Right? That's, you know. I don't know about that, Milo. I'll hear you out. You can type what you want, but no, I mean, I don't know how I would react. Is it really a suicide? Like, you know, what if you're standing there with your wife and you approach a gunman that you think might shoot you? Do you have a suicide watch, or were you trying to help your wife? So I don't know about that. And regardless of, like, I'm not going to question the motivation of the person because, you know, they're dead. So we don't get to answer. We'll never know the full truth unless there's, like, some kind of document that comes out that the kid said, I'm suicidal, and if a gunman ever came, I don't care about helping people, I just want to kill myself. Like, I don't see that happening, and so I'm not going to question the motivation of the person. And it's worth saying, you know, we should celebrate acts, regardless of the motivation, that are done that could potentially save lives. You know, someone might be suicidal that runs into a burning building to save an infant, but that doesn't mean I'm going to delegitimize their effort, as far as I'm concerned. But it's just me. Anyways, neither here nor there for exactly what I'm saying. But it just, like, this idea of politicizing these kind of tragedies, and I just want to say good for those kids for actually walking out. And for all I know, many of those kids might agree with the gun control agenda, and I would disagree with them. But I think what they were trying to say is, like, too soon. You know? It just, you know, and again, I do think that this happens more on the left than the right, that they tend to deal with things emotionally, and that they want to, like, you know, my buddy Drone Tech's live stream yesterday, he had this gentleman on from England who's left-leaning, and he was talking about education and healthcare, and his reason for thinking the U.S. should have basically Medicare for all and full government education system is because health and education is an investment into the future. But that's skipping the big middle part, right? Like, yes, if you're a decent person, regardless if you're a Republican, Democrat, conservative, liberal, we probably all want the same conclusions. You don't want people to be sick. You don't want people to be poor. You want everyone to be as happy as possible. Have maximum freedom. You know, you don't want anyone breaking laws. People to be happy. People to be able to be with their families and who they're with. Meaningful jobs. Making good amounts of money. You know what I mean? Like, that's what we all want. It's a question of how do we get there. And I'm sick and tired of, like, positions that I hold that I'm told, well, if you don't agree with me, then you clearly, you know, with the gun control debate, it might be, if you don't agree that we need to control these guns, then clearly you don't mind children being shot. That's absurd. That couldn't be further from the truth. I was against the war on poverty. I think that incentivizing single motherhood, particularly in the African American community, is one of the most devastating things that's been done to that community. I don't want economic or any sorts of government policies geared to people based on their race. I think that there have been tragic and terrible things done to people based on racial groups in the history of this country. But the more we focus on it, the less healing that we could have, and the more that we have kind of end up with this bigotry of low expectations that says like, oh, this group's not as good as this group, so they need help. That's garbage. Clean the slate. Yes, there's unfair. If your great-great-grandfather was a victim of slavery or something like that, you might say that, but there's never going to be a totally fair system. The best thing we could do for the greatest good for everyone is to start clean and not have these type of policies, to treat everyone as equals, not to treat them based on their skin color. So when I say I'm against affirmative action or I'm against these war on poverty policies, it's not because I dislike black community. It's not just because I don't care about the inner city. To the contrary, I do care about them. I respect them enough to know that if we, through a generation or two, treat them like any other group, that they'll be just as successful, in my opinion. Yet, because I'm against those policies, then it's instantly said, so you don't care about black people. No! I don't want Medicare for all, so I don't care if people get sick and die. I don't care if they're... No, that's not it at all. I'm saying that I think your solution will be net worse for more people. That's all. Oh, you want a border wall up, so you don't care about poor people in other countries. That's not it at all. I think that you're going to make the situation worse. I think that you'll increase poverty in this country. I think those people will directly compete with the poorest people in this country. I think that our government policy should be about helping our citizens out the most, just like other countries should be. I think that when we get and almost every time we interfere in other countries and we start to do things like allow, people to come or, send them financial aid or something, we end up spiraling out of control and we make the situation in those countries worse. If a private individual wants to send money to these countries, fine. But it's not the place of the government to force at the threat of gunpoint or a criminal prosecution to take your tax dollars and to spend them in these ways, or to not have open borders and things like that. That doesn't mean I don't care about the people. But when we take these emotional arguments, you lead to all sorts of insanity, right? So we, Medicare for all. Okay, $30 trillion. Where are you getting that, Bernie? It'll pay for itself. You got Ocasio-Cortez. Oh, we have to get rid of all automobiles in 12 years or we're all dead. How do you suggest doing that? That sounds good. What about 12 years and one day when my grandma gets sick and an ambulance needs to pick her up? Sorry, dude. Better hope that horse can make it its way. But don't worry, because the hospital won't have power anyways to give your grandma any treatments. It's like, what are you talking about? This is based on, because you're just looking at it emotionally, you're advocating nonsensical policies that could never achieve anything. Oftentimes make things exactly the worse. But I'm kind of rambling. Let me see real quick. Yeah, I don't know. I have questions about... Here's something unpopular. I have questions about this whole bullying. I don't know. Bullying exists. I was bullied. I did bully people. I wasn't bullied, terribly or anything like that. I don't know. Oftentimes the story is more complex than it seems. I've heard stories of people that are horribly bullied, and then when you get right down to it, it's like, oh, they did their share of bullying as well. What is the excuse? So these people were bullied because of gender fluidity, or the Columbine kids were bullied, or this, that, and the other. Well, possibly, but so? Of course, no one on this chat, or I don't think anyone's saying that justifies them doing what they're doing. Yeah, my thinking on, one, I think we have to be careful is, you have to start at granted, if we're looking at an individual situation, so be it. But the first thing you have to do is start of, is the problem getting better or worse? So I'll give you an example. In debate, we often, there was a topic one year where we, why can't I think of the name of this decision? Maybe it was Morrison, but we had to overturn a Supreme Court decision, and one of them had to do with the Violence Against Women Act. And the specific court case was this. There was a woman who was sexually assaulted or raped on campus, and I believe they got the assailant, and he was criminally charged and everything. But the woman also took to the Supreme Court that she was trying to sue the university under the Interstate Commerce Clause. That because the university, she was a professor at the university, and because that university had students coming in from out of state, that was interstate commerce, and her attack affected that commerce, and therefore she should be allowed to civilly sue the school based on the interstate commerce. And the court ruled no, that wasn't the case. And so a lot of teams chose, this was their plan, to overturn that decision and say, yes, she did have the right to sue under the Interstate Commerce Clause. And they would cite the Violence Against Women Act, and they would cite all these statistics about violence against women. And one of the arguments you would make is, actually, according to all statistics, violence against women's sharply declining, particularly in the United States, but worldwide, I believe. But it's declining in the United States. And they would be incessant that you would even have the nerve to say that. How dare you? You know, so you're saying you don't mind if some woman gets hurt? No, that's not what I'm saying at all. But we have to, when you're weighing any policy, you have to weigh the positive and the negatives. And, you know, climate change would be another one. We can actually see, without the Paris Climate Accord and things like that, that actually greenhouse gas emissions in the United States are actually being lowered, just because as technological advances, as the free market says that things like green energy is more profitable, it gradually comes. That's what it does. And so it's worth talking about these things. School shootings, it's the same thing to me, right? Like, it's easy to get emotionally wrapped up, but we hear about how this is becoming this, it's getting worse and worse every year. Is it? Or is just the reporting on it getting more and more? I don't know. The numbers I show that actually the shootings have gone down. Even before the 70s and stuff. I mean, remember, it was blamed on violent video games. That was a big thing. You know, there's a Penn and Teller episode of that show they did bullshit where they talk about this. But actually, the numbers show that deaths in schools were actually way higher. Violent deaths in schools were way higher, like, prior to the 70s. Like, was it because video games back then? Well, there weren't video games. You know? Was it, we have way more guns now, but are the school shootings going up or down? Or is it just that the reporting's going up on them? Before I could comfortably say, I believe the numbers I've seen show that they're going down. But I'm not 100% comfortable in that to make that claim. But that's where we should start. Is the problem getting better or worse? Now, having said that, even if the problem's getting better, that doesn't mean we shouldn't address each individual situation and say, are there things we could do to make it even better? So I get it, and if part of that discussion is gun control, I disagree with that, but I can see how that would be a gut feeling that people would want to talk about. So, like, as far as bullying and things like that, like, is bullying worse now than it has been in the past? I don't know. You know, one of the things I said was, I talked to, like, people in my dad's generation, and, you know, my dad grew up poor, and he was mocked because he grew up in a poor area, and, you know, and he was just like, dude, you just throw down. You just beat the crap out of that person that's bullying you. And if you got caught, you got, like, a detention, or you got suspended for 3 days. Now it's like, if you throw a fist at someone, like, the police are getting called, you could be going to jail, you know, things like that. And so we've pacified where the idea of, like, some of, like, general aggression that used to occur is now, it's so, you can't do anything about it. So, like, maybe you're that Columbine kid and, you know, that bully used to be giving you wet willies or saying whatever, and one day you just snap and punched him right in the nose. You know, now that's such a stigma that you can't use that, you can't do that whatsoever. The consequences of doing that are so high that it just builds up and up and up and up and up and up, and then, poof, you explode in the worst possible way, you know? I don't know. That's just one feeling I got. And then there's a question of, it used to be when you got bullied, you were basically bullied at school, but you had somewhat of a sanctuary at home, at least most people. But now with social media and stuff, it's like that bullying can continue while you're at home because, you know, and it's not just that. Like, it used to be you did something stupid, whether it be in high school or just in life in general, and after a while, people forget about it, you know, it's not really talked about. But now if you say or do something dumb online, it's there forever, you know? And so it seems like it's easier to get kind of negative and to get like depressed or something like that. And so that's maybe why we'd see people with more, depression or suicidal tendencies or, that act out in these shooting ways. I don't know. It's a very difficult problem. It could be because we're prescribing medications that are having adverse effects that are causing this more than we used to. I don't know, but it's a very complex issue. It's definitely one worth talking about. But it's always, it's just so easy. It's so cheap to just be like, guns! Why, I don't know. And there's a time and a place to have these discussions. It's not at a funeral. It's not at a vigil, Yeah, I mean, bullying's terrible. I never did stuff like that. I mean, I picked on people pretty severely, though. And I was picked on pretty severely. I thought, I had this thought in my head where, like, I was usually picking on people that I thought deserved it in one way or another. So maybe they were the popular kids in school, so I would pick on them. Or they, they were wealthy. Or, they picked on my friends, so I would pick on them. Or whatever, So, I mean, it's oftentimes complicated. Sometimes you don't realize that you're doing things that could be considered bullying to other people. You just see the negative reaction back to you, I don't know. It's a difficult thing. So, but I don't know if the problem is worse, like with school shootings, if it's getting much worse or if it just seems that way because they're reporting on it. But you feel bad for any of these situations. So, all right, if no one has anything else, I have to be at work in an hour, so I should leave my dog out and get ready for that. But thanks for tuning in. I'll be trying, like I said, if you just bear with me through the end of May, I'm getting a new house. I'll have more time and stuff. I'm trying to work crazy amounts of overtime. I do think this Barr situation is important. The Russia situation is important. So I'll be trying to do videos in the odd chance when I can. It's very difficult for me to do videos at work because of the nature of my work, home healthcare. Sometimes you have downtime where maybe I could do stuff. Other times we're constantly on the move, things like that. So it just, you never know. So it's hard for me to say, oh, this is exactly what my time frame will be of putting out videos. But yeah, if you like the videos, please subscribe if you haven't. Recommend me to some other people. My goal is to try to get up to 1,000 subscribers because YouTube changed their policy where I can't live stream now with mobile unless I have 1,000 subscribers. And there were some things I wanted to do, like rallies and stuff, once we get closer to the 2020 election, where maybe I wanted to go and like try to do live streams at rallies and stuff like that. So I currently won't be able to do that unless I get to 1,000 subscribers. So that's just a little benchmark I've set for myself. But yeah, thanks everyone for tuning in, and I'm going to try to get more people to do the show with me, particularly people that disagree with me, because I think that would be a more fruitful conversation. But thanks everyone, and have a good one. We'll talk to you all soon.